Story 1. The road out of Amboy had that heat-shimmered look, like it was trying to shake something off. Claire was asleep beside me, her bare feet propped on the dash, one arm flopped across her chest like she'd given up mid-sentence. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping rhythmically against my knee, not because I was nervous, not yet, but because it was the only sound in the RV besides the low whine of tires against scorched asphalt. We hadn't passed another car in maybe an hour. The Mojave swallowed noise like a mouthful of sand. You don't realize how loud life normally is until you spend enough time out here. Eventually, the silence starts to stretch. It starts to bend. We were looking for a place to stop for the night. Nothing official. Just one of those little pullouts where you park off BLM land and watch the sun drop behind the rock like God's clock is winding down. Claire and I had been doing this for 4 weeks already. She called it our dry run before buying land. I called it a break. From what I couldn't exactly say. Life, maybe. The mess we'd left in Sacramento. The job I quit or the one she didn't take. We'd both agreed not to talk about it out loud. Around 6 p.m., my phone dropped signal. Not a surprise out here, but something about it made me glance at the mirror anyway. Just open desert behind us, shimmering like glass. The kind of openness that makes you think you're being watched. I woke Claire up around 7 when the sun started dropping hard and the horizon turned the color of bruised peaches. There's supposed to be a turnoff soon, I told her. Somewhere near Kelso Dunes. She blinked at me, disoriented. We passed that an hour ago. I looked at the map. She was right. That's what threw me, because according to the GPS, we hadn't moved. The blue dot was still frozen in the middle of a straight line. I tapped the screen a few times, then tried to reboot the app. Nothing. Even the compass didn't rotate when I spun the phone in my hand. Maybe we lost satellite sync, Claire said. Should we just pull off? There's nothing out here, I told her. No signs, no markers. We were already down to half a tank, and I didn't want to burn through the rest, wandering God knows where. I reached for the glove box, pulled out an old Rand McNally atlas we kept as backup. I flipped through it until I found the section on southeastern California. Nothing looked familiar. And then Claire pointed. What about that? There, just off the highway, a barely visible grid of pale, faded lines. No name, no highway number, just a faint suggestion of civilization tucked in a blank patch of beige. It's not labeled, I said. Might not even be real. Still better than sleeping on the shoulder, she replied, already reaching for the water jug. We found the turnoff 15 minutes later, a gravel road half swallowed by sand and lined with splintered Joshua trees. The RV lurched as we bumped down it, wheels kicking up dust that stuck to the windows in gray, greasy smears. About 2 miles in, we saw it. At first, I thought it was a mirage, just a shimmer against the setting sun. But then the shape solidified. Low buildings, a single church spire, a water tower with something painted on the side I couldn't quite read. The town looked preserved, like a movie set. No graffiti, no collapsed roofs, no boarded windows, but also no cars, no movement, no signs of life. We passed an old diner with shiny red booths and a gas station where the price still read $1.32. Claire stared out the window, mouth slightly open. I feel like I've seen this place before, she said quietly. I didn't answer, because I felt it too. Not déjà vu, more like memory loss. Like the details were buried in my brain somewhere, just out of reach. We pulled into what must have once been a town square, a circular street looped around a dry fountain, maybe 5 or 6 buildings all facing inward. There were no signs of decay, no dust on the windows, no spider webs in the eaves. Claire got out first. Her sandals crunched against the dirt like glass underfoot. The air smelled off. Dry, of course, but tinged with something floral, like jasmine or rosewater, something too delicate for a place like this. I stepped out and immediately felt it, that shift in pressure, not wind, not temperature, just a stillness that pressed against the skin, like the town was waiting. We should knock, Claire said, motioning to the closest house. It was a small bungalow with white trim and a porch swing that creaked slightly in the breeze. A woman answered the door, middle-aged maybe, hard to tell. She had a fixed, pleasant expression and eyes that looked through you like you were part of the air. "Can we help you?" Claire asked. The woman smiled. "You're just in time for dinner." I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already turning away, motioning for us to follow. Inside, the house was pristine, like something out of the 50s. Rotary phone, floral wallpaper, yellow checkered tablecloth. The smell of cooked meat and sweet rolls hung in the air like a warm hand pressing on your chest. Two others were already seated, an older man with weathered hands and a boy no older than 8. Both looked up as we entered, smiled, and said nothing. The woman gestured for us to sit. "You're our guests tonight. We don't get many, but we always make room." Claire hesitated, then glanced at me. I shrugged. My mouth was dry. The idea of a hot meal was strangely comforting, even if my gut had started to feel tight in a way I didn't quite trust. We sat. No one asked our names. No one offered theirs. The woman served pork roast and peas, thick brown gravy, a slice of lemon pie that looked like it came straight from a vintage cookbook. The boy didn't touch his food. He just stared at Claire with wide, unblinking eyes. After a while, the man looked at me. "Where you headed?" I paused. "Nowhere in particular. Just camping." The man nodded. "That's the best kind of travel." Claire cleared her throat. "This place, what's it called?" The man just smiled. "This place is here." Claire frowned. "No, I mean," the woman interrupted. "We don't bother with names much anymore. Not necessary." That's when I noticed the calendar on the wall, July 1961. I stared at the calendar longer than I should have. Not because it was old. Plenty of small towns kept relics like that hanging for charm. But this one wasn't yellowed or torn. It was crisp, fresh. The dates hadn't curled from heat or time. The ink was still deep black. The little red X's marked off each day were sharp, like they'd just been drawn. Claire touched my knee under the table. A small thing, but intentional. I looked at her, and she gave me a tight-lipped smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. That same smile she used when something at her parents' house made her uncomfortable, but she didn't want to start anything. The meal went on without a sound. Just the scrape of forks, the ticking of an unseen clock, the boy's stare. The smell of pie was too sweet now, cloying, like it was hiding something sour beneath it. After a while, the woman stood and began clearing dishes. No one had finished. She didn't ask if we were done. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a matchbook. He set it on the table in front of me. "For later," he said, "if you need light." I didn't move to touch it. The matchbook looked brand new, white, with clean black lettering across the front that read, "Welcome. Stay as long as you like." No address, no phone number. I forced a polite nod. "Thanks." The man stood too, nodded once, then walked out the front door. Just like that, the boy followed, still silent, barefoot on the wooden floor. Claire leaned closer. "We need to go." I didn't argue. Every instinct I had, the ones I'd ignored before, were now pulling tight around my spine. We left without saying goodbye. The woman didn't stop us. She just kept washing dishes, her back to us like we'd never been there at all. Back in the RV, Claire grabbed the keys before I could. "Drive or not," she said, "but I'm not staying another minute." We pulled out of the square and back onto the narrow road that had brought us in. Dust curled behind us. The town didn't shrink the way it should have. Usually, places vanish behind you, shrink down into heat-blurred dots until they disappear. This one didn't. It held in the rear view like a picture. We drove until the sun was gone and the sky turned a bruised navy blue. I kept checking the odometer. Miles ticked up. The road did not change. Every bend looked like the last. The same Joshua trees, the same dry brush, the same rusted fence leaning sideways into nothing. "Did we already pass that rock?" Claire asked. "I don't know," I said, but I did. Around midnight, we stopped. Not because we wanted to, because we had to. We were running low on gas, and my eyes were starting to burn from the strain. We pulled off at a patch of packed sand near a canyon wall, just far enough from the road to feel like we weren't in open view. Claire didn't speak as we settled in. She crawled into the bed with her back to me and pulled the covers up over her head. I stood by the kitchenette for a long while, just listening. Nothing. Not wind. Not crickets. Not even the groan of the desert cooling after dark. I opened the little window by the stove and leaned out. Still nothing. And then I caught it. That scent again. Faint. Like rose petals left too long in water. It slid through the window like a hand brushing my face. I closed it, locked it, then checked the others. All shut, all latched. Still, the air inside felt wrong, like the town had exhaled and we were still breathing it in. I sat on the edge of the bed but didn't lie down. I stared at the matchbook still in my pocket. I hadn't meant to keep it, but I guess I'd grabbed it on the way out. I flipped it open. Instead of matches, inside were 5 tiny slips of paper, each with a name written in soft black ink. Claire Isaac, Margaret Henry Aiden. I didn't know the last 3, but the first 2 were ours. I didn't tell her. I just sat there staring at our names until I couldn't hold my eyes open anymore. I must have dozed off because at some point I woke to the sound of the RV door creaking open. Claire? No answer. I sat up. She wasn't in bed. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, the night swallowing me instantly. The beam caught the canyon wall and a few scattered rocks, but otherwise it was just void. No stars, no moon, just black sky pressing down. Claire? Still nothing. Then, crunching footsteps. To the left, I turned the beam toward the sound and caught a figure just at the edge of its reach. I moved closer. It was Claire, standing completely still, facing away from me, barefoot in the sand. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Claire? My voice cracked. What the hell are you doing? She didn't turn. I walked up, touched her shoulder. She flinched so hard she almost fell, her eyes locked on mine, wide and glassy. I thought I saw someone. Out here? She nodded slowly, like she wasn't sure if it had really happened. They were just standing there, watching the RV. A man, I think. I turned the flashlight in a circle. Nothing. Come on, I said. Let's go back inside. We did. We locked the door, closed the blinds, and left every light on. Neither of us slept. The next morning, the road was gone. I don't mean buried by sand. I mean gone. Like it had never been there. Just endless stretches of rock and brush in every direction. Claire stood next to me, squinting into the sun. We didn't move the RV, right? No. Then where the hell is the road? I didn't answer, because I had just seen something far worse. On the windshield, stuck beneath the wiper, was one of the slips of paper from the matchbook. Just one word written on it now, stay. I didn't touch the note. Not at first. I just stood there staring at it, like if I waited long enough, it would change. The ink was delicate, almost calligraphic, not smeared, not sun-faded. It had been placed there recently, which meant someone had been near the RV while we slept. Claire stood frozen beside me. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, like she was trying to hold her inside still. I locked the door, she whispered. I checked it twice. I know, I said, but I didn't really. I didn't know anything anymore. I reached forward and peeled the slip from under the wiper. It came loose too easily. No condensation, no grit from the dust. The paper was clean, too clean. What the hell does that mean? Claire asked. I didn't answer, because that single word, stay, wasn't a warning. It was a command. I looked around, scanning the horizon again. No road, no tire tracks, not even the ruts we'd made coming off it last night. The earth had reset itself while we slept. We got back in the RV and drove in the direction we thought the road had been. The terrain was uneven, chewing up our tires. The temperature climbed fast, 94, then 101. By mid-morning, it was over 110. The AC strained against it. So did we. For hours, we crawled over sun-bleached ground, watching the gas tank inch closer to empty. Every direction looked the same. No variation in the skyline, no distant buildings or signs, just the endless pulse of heat pressing down from above. Eventually, Claire said it out loud, the thing we'd both been thinking but hadn't dared give shape. We're going in circles. She was right. We found our own tire tracks, not once, but twice. A distinct rock I'd passed that morning, shaped like a long bent finger. An empty beer bottle I remembered tossing out the window back when I still believed we were just lost. But the real confirmation came when we saw the canyon wall again, the place we'd camped the night before. Same contours, same cracks, same dark smudge that looked like a face if you squinted. And just ahead, in the exact spot we'd parked, that note. Pinned to a cactus with a nail fluttering slightly in the hot wind. I didn't get out this time. I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my knuckles pale. Claire was crying now. Quietly, the kind where the sound gets swallowed before it leaves the throat. I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay, but the words tasted like dust. We turned the RV around again, picked another direction. Anything to avoid the canyon wall, the cactus, the idea that the desert was folding us in tighter each time we tried to escape. But somewhere after 3 p.m., the engine began to shudder, and 5 minutes later, it died. We coasted to a stop in the middle of nowhere. No shade, no movement. The silence settled like a thick cloth over everything. Claire curled into the passenger seat, covering her face with her arms. We're gonna die out here. I didn't tell her she was wrong. I didn't have it in me. Instead, I climbed onto the roof to see if I could spot anything from higher up. A cell tower, a dust trail, a road shimmer, even the town. But there was nothing. Nothing, except for one thing. About half a mile east, there was a single building. Square, low-roofed, with a short chimney and a porch out front. Completely alone, like it had been dropped there. And even though I just scanned that direction 10 minutes before, I knew it hadn't been there. I climbed back down. Claire looked up as I opened the door. "There's a house," I told her. "I'm going." She blinked. "We didn't see a house." "I know. You think it's from the town? I don't know. You think it's safe?" "No." But I was already filling a bottle with water and grabbing the flashlight. I looked back once before I left. She didn't follow. The walk was longer than it looked. The ground shimmered beneath my boots, and the air had that strange, syrupy quality again, like every breath was filtered through perfume. Rose again. Faint, not sweet. The closer I got to the house, the more unnatural it looked. The porch had no dust on it. The windows had no glass, just empty frames, like eyes without lids. The chimney wasn't attached to anything inside. Just for show. Still, I knocked. There was no sound. I tried the door. It opened too easily. The interior was empty. Not just unfurnished. Bare. The floor was smooth and pale, no seams or cracks. The walls had no texture. It didn't feel like a place someone had lived in. It didn't feel like a place at all. I stepped inside, and immediately I felt colder. Not cool. Cold. In the middle of a desert afternoon, the air sucked the heat out of my skin like it had been waiting for me. I turned in a slow circle. The walls had changed. Now there were photos hanging, dozens of them, all in identical black frames. Most were portraits, straight on, staring faces. Some looked recent, others looked like they were taken decades ago. All of them shared the same expression, calm, polite, waiting. And in the center of the far wall, framed larger than the others, was a photo of Claire and me. Taken from behind, outside the RV. From last night, we were both standing in the dark, looking out into the desert, and behind us, just barely visible in the shadows, was the outline of a person. Watching. I stepped back, nearly tripped over something, a low wooden table that hadn't been there a second ago. On it, another slip of paper. My name. Just mine this time. Written in that same elegant black ink. The air behind me changed. I turned around. The room was empty. The photos were gone. The walls were bare again, and the door, the one I'd come through, was gone too. I stood in the middle of the room, staring at where the door had been. There wasn't even a seam in the wall. Just smooth surface, pale and featureless, as if the opening had never existed. I called out once, quietly. Then louder. "Claire." Nothing. My voice hit the walls and didn't bounce back. No echo, no resonance. Just silence, thick and swallowing. The air kept getting colder. I turned back to the table. The paper with my name was still there, perfectly centered, like it was being displayed. I didn't want to touch it, couldn't explain why, but something about it felt invasive. Like if I picked it up, I'd be confirming something, accepting it. Instead, I took a step toward the nearest wall and ran my palm across the surface. Smooth, cool, almost too cool, like ceramic or something older. I took a verve. I took a breath and balled my fist and pounded once. The sound it made was wrong, hollow, but not in the way wood sounds. More like knocking on a coffin. Thick, dull, muffled. I tried again, harder. No give, no sound from beyond, just that same unnatural thud. I backed away and turned in a slow circle. The room was changing again. Subtle things, corners elongating slightly, ceilings stretching upward, shadows thickening near the floor. The table was still there, but now it seemed farther from the walls, as if the room had grown wider. And then I noticed something new, writing on the far wall. Not paint, not carved, just faint black lines rising across the surface like veins. I stepped closer. It wasn't a drawing. It was text. Dozens of names written in narrow, elegant cursive. Hundreds, maybe. Layered over one another, forming a kind of calligraphic wallpaper. Most of them I didn't recognize, but some stood out. Claire McKinley, Margaret Lang, Henry Ash, Aidan R. Cole, Isaac Farrow. That last one, mine, was larger than the others. I reached for it instinctively, and as I did, the air behind me shifted, a hum, low and close, like a breath beside my ear. I spun. No one was there. But the room had changed again. Now, instead of a single table, there were two chairs facing each other. A white porcelain teacup sat on one. The other was empty. I walked to it slowly, stomach turning. On the seat of the empty chair sat another slip of paper. It read, "Sit. Let us remember you." I backed away. "No," I said, voice cracking. "No, I'm not staying here." The walls around me pulsed, almost like they were breathing. The text shimmered faintly. More names were appearing, etching themselves in slow, graceful strokes. I watched my own name begin to multiply, forming rings around itself. I ran to where the door had been, slammed my fists against the wall, yelling, "Claire! Claire, can you hear me?" My voice cracked. My throat burned. The air tasted like chalk and roses. My fists were going numb. Then, a sound. Not from the wall, but from inside the room. It was soft, rhythmic, tapping. I turned slowly. Claire stood on the other side of the room, barefoot, staring at me, her eyes wide, her face pale. She wasn't moving, but something was wrong. She looked flattened, dimmed, like she wasn't fully there. "Claire," I whispered. She didn't answer. Then she opened her mouth, but what came out wasn't a voice. It was a whisper made of many voices layered together, like 100 people all saying the same word at once, slightly out of sync. The word was, "Stay." I stumbled back. The walls pulsed again. The lights dimmed, though I couldn't see any fixtures, just an ambient glow that began to fade. Claire's image flickered, just once, like a projection. Then she was gone. The room was empty. Just me, the chairs, and the growing list of names curling across the walls like vines. I slumped to the floor. My breath was shaking. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, the air warmed. The walls seemed to stop shifting. I couldn't tell if the room had gone still or if I had. Then a click, soft, metallic. I looked up. The door was back, right where it had been. Without thinking, I ran to it, flung it open. Blinding white light hit me like a wave. For a moment, I thought I'd stepped into nothingness. Then the desert came into view, blurred, distorted, like I was seeing it through a film of heat. The RV was still there, and Claire was sitting just outside it, arms wrapped around her knees, staring straight ahead. I stumbled toward her, limbs heavy. When she saw me, her face crumpled. She ran to meet me, grabbing my arms. "Where the hell did you go?" she shouted. "I looked for you for hours." I don't know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The house, the door disappeared. There were names, photos. There was no house," she said, shaking her head. "I walked that way. I watched you vanish into thin air. I was gone that long? You were gone all night." She pulled me into a hug, but I couldn't return it, because over her shoulder, nailed to the side of the RV, was a new note. Same handwriting. "We let you leave once." We didn't wait. Claire threw everything she could grab into the cabinets while I checked the engine. The heat was already rising again, 108 before noon, and the air had that brittle, trembling quality to it, like it could shatter if you moved too fast. I didn't say what I was thinking, that we wouldn't get far, that maybe we were never meant to. I just kept tightening bolts, checking wires, reattaching a hose I didn't remember detaching. My hands were shaking the whole time. The RV sputtered, coughed, then turned over. We drove without speaking. Claire kept glancing in the mirrors, like something might be chasing us, and I couldn't blame her. The desert behind us seemed too still, too perfectly untouched. No tire marks, no footprints, no trace that we'd ever been there. Every few miles, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure standing beside a rock, a face in the rear view. Gone the moment I looked directly at it. It wasn't until we crested a low ridge, maybe 20 minutes out, that we saw it again. The town, right in front of us, just beyond a shallow canyon. Same grid of low, tan buildings. Same sun-bleached signs, same rusted diner with the collapsing roof. Only this time, it wasn't distant or dreamlike. It was right there, and impossible to deny. Claire exhaled sharply. No, we left. We left. I know, I said, but it felt like lying. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. Not really. I pulled off the road, or what passed for one, and killed the engine. We sat there in silence for a long time, staring. The town wasn't just familiar. It was identical. Every detail. Same dented gas pump, same blue curtain flapping in the same broken window of the motel on the corner, the same cracked tile above the barbershop entrance. Nothing had changed, not even the light. It was frozen in that late afternoon hue, soft and amber and wrong, as if time had paused somewhere around 5:17 p.m. and refused to move again. Claire finally said what we were both thinking. It's looping, or folding. We're not driving in circles, the place is. She turned to me. What if we didn't leave? What if we can't? I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the fear in her voice wasn't just panic, it was recognition. We'd seen places like this before, or versions of them. Claire had visited Body as a kid, one of those dusty, unmoving ghost towns where even the curtains still hang in perfect place, like the residents might return any second. Places that feel like they remember too much. But this place refused to die, and we were caught in it. Still, we needed answers, water, gas, a way out. So we went back. We didn't want to, not really, but there was nowhere else. The road behind us led straight back to where we'd started. We'd checked twice. So we walked into the town again like we hadn't before, like it hadn't claimed us already. Only this time something was different. The people were gone. No old man at the garage, no girls on the diner steps, no porch sitters. The streets were empty, like the whole town had exhaled and disappeared in one long breath. But things were still warm. The bench where the girls had sat had fresh indentations in the cushion. A half-drunk soda cup was still sweating on the diner counter. And from somewhere inside the motel, a television was playing, faint, distant, grainy. A laugh track looped once, then again, slightly slower. We walked down the main road, past the saloon, past the chapel. The same strange floral smell hung in the air. Not pleasant anymore, like something rotting beneath perfume. Claire grabbed my hand. Her skin was clammy. What if this place doesn't want people? Just the memory of them. The words lodged in my chest like a splinter, because they felt true. That's when I saw it, a building I hadn't noticed before. It sat at the far end of the street, squatting low between two crooked houses. Sandstone walls, shuttered windows, no sign or markings. But I knew it. It was the same building I'd seen in the desert, the one I entered, the one without a door. But here in town it had one. Claire hesitated. I know. We walked toward it. The closer we got, the colder the air became. Not wind, just a slow draining of warmth, as if the space around the building refused heat. There were more notes nailed to the side, hundreds, maybe thousands. Thin slips of paper fluttering like a skin made of names. Some were faded to near transparency, others looked freshly inked. We scanned them. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe our own names again. A sign we were still eligible, trapped. But what I saw was worse. I recognized one, a man I knew from college, Paul Chamberlain. Vanished in Arizona, 2011. Another one, Jasmine Reed. We'd seen her missing poster at a rest stop 2 years ago. Then Claire sucked in a sharp breath and pointed. Her sister's name. Emily McKinley, I turned to her. I thought she went missing in Colorado, right? The Rockies? Claire nodded slowly, hand pressed against the note. She was hiking with friends. They turned around after a storm. She didn't. She turned to me, her face pale. Isaac, she was never found. I looked back at the note and realized something worse. There was no age on these slips, no dates, just the names, as if time itself didn't matter anymore. I turned back to the door. It was open. Inside, the room was exactly the same as before. Same 2 chairs, same porcelain teacup, same low hum in the air, just barely audible, like a memory playing on loop. But now there was something else, a 3rd chair, facing the other 2. Empty. Waiting. We didn't go inside, not yet. Claire took a step toward the threshold, but I caught her wrist. I went in once, I said. That's enough. She didn't argue, just stood there, staring through the doorway like it might blink first. Her face looked older than it had this morning. Drawn. Lost. I gently pulled her back. We walked away, slowly at first, then faster. But I never turned my back on that building. Not fully. I kept it in my peripheral vision, and I half afraid it would leap forward like an animal if I looked away. It never moved. Still, I felt it watching us. The whole town was. We passed the post office, the one with the shuttered windows, and noticed movement behind the glass. Just a flicker. A silhouette. Gone as soon as we paused. A shop window nearby showed our reflection, but it wasn't right. Claire's reflection blinked twice as she stood still. Mine didn't blink at all. We kept walking. There were no sounds anymore. No wind, no birds, not even the quiet ticking of heat expanding in metal, just our footsteps and our breathing. That was somehow worse. We made it back to the RV, hands shaking as we opened the door and slammed it behind us. I started the engine. It turned over. This time it purred like it wanted to leave too. Claire didn't say anything. She just stood by the sink, gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. Where do we go? She whispered. I don't know. Anywhere but here. I nodded, put it in drive. We followed a narrow side road that veered south, one I didn't remember seeing before. But at that point, nothing made sense. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe it just appeared. I didn't care. All that mattered was forward. Miles passed. The town receded behind us. The terrain changed. Low scrub gave way to bare rock. Then hills. Then a winding canyon. Sunlight shifted. The smell of creosote faded. The air even felt thinner, lighter. We drove until dusk. Then dusk didn't end. The sun dropped behind the horizon and just stayed there. Caught in this long, burnt orange afterglow, like the world was stuck in the final seconds of a sunset that refused to darken. The dashboard clock flicked from 7:19 to 7:20, then back to 7:19. Claire noticed too. She didn't say anything, just pointed. I tapped the dash, hit the reset. Nothing. The GPS was blank. No signal. No map. Just the little arrow floating in a sea of gray. We weren't on any road. We weren't anywhere at all. Claire pulled out the old paper map we'd used as backup. There was no trace of the town. Not even an old name scratched out. No routes leading into that part of the desert. Just a blank beige expanse labeled Bureau Land, restricted access. We stopped near a dry wash. Claire stepped outside to breathe. I watched her from the window. She turned slowly, taking in the terrain, then stopped and pointed. I came out to see what she was looking at. It was a sign half buried in the sand, metal, rusted. We dug it out. The words were almost gone, but not completely. Welcome to Mercy. See, Claire backed up like it had bitten her. Mercy, she whispered. That wasn't on anything. No GPS, no local records. I stared at the sign, the name twisted in my gut. It felt wrong, like the kind of name a place gives itself after everyone's forgotten what it used to be. We flipped the sign over. There was something scrawled on the back, not printed, handwritten, etched deep into the metal with something sharp. Stay as long as you like. Time already has. We didn't talk after that. We drove through the night, or what passed for it. The light never shifted. The sky just stayed in that purgatory glow, frozen and tired. Eventually, the road reappeared beneath us. Then a sign, a real one. Interstate 40, 6 miles. We both gasped. Claire started crying quietly. We took the turn, and the world began to stitch itself back together. Gas stations, billboards, power lines, the real world. We didn't stop until we reached a populated rest area an hour east. A Denny's, a few trucks, cell signal. Claire fell asleep in the passenger seat, finally curled up like a child. Her breathing shallow but steady. I sat outside the RV and watched the traffic hum by, lights blinking in a rhythm that felt comfortingly mundane. I thought about the people in that town, how none of them aged, how none of them ever left. And I thought about the note nailed to our RV back in the desert. We let you leave once. The word once echoed in my skull. I don't know what mercy really is. A place, a memory, a trap. But I do know this. Somewhere out there in the Mojave, a town still waits. Not dying, not living, just remembering. And it remembers us now. Claire wanted to go home. Not back to the coast, not yet. Just somewhere with trees, water, a town on a map. She said it without looking at me, just staring at her hands like she barely trusted them to move. We ended up near Flagstaff, a pine-sheltered campground off the 89, clean and quiet, with real people and kids chasing each other between picnic tables. It should have felt normal, safe. But something about the air still clung to us, like we dragged part of that place back with us. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those buildings in the heat shimmer. That third chair, empty and expectant. Those notes nailed in neat rows, names like headstones without graves. Claire slept with the curtains drawn every night. She didn't ask questions. She didn't talk much. She'd just sit with her back to the RV wall, earbuds in, listening to something I couldn't hear. Sometimes I'd find her staring at the map again, tracing over that blank space in the Mojave like she was trying to will it into showing itself. I didn't stop her. I kept checking the RV every morning, fluids, tires, battery. Like if I kept it running, it would keep us running, keep us out. Then one morning, 4 days later, I found a note tucked under the wiper blade, not taped, not folded, just wedged there like someone knew I'd find it. My chest locked up when I saw the handwriting, same thin, upright letters from the building's wall. But this note didn't have a name, just one line: mercy is patient. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind sounded too much like whispering. The shadows beneath the pine trees shifted in ways I couldn't track. I walked outside with a flashlight and turned in slow circles, checking for anyone, anything, nothing. But when I turned the beam back toward the RV, I caught a reflection in the side mirror. A face, my own. Except it wasn't quite right. No blink, no breath, just waiting. I climbed back inside, locked every door, sat beside Claire while she slept, listening to her breathe. I held her hand until morning came, and even then, I wasn't sure it really did. The light felt wrong for a while after that, like it wasn't landing the way it should, like shadows were being cast in the wrong direction. It passed, eventually, or we stopped noticing. That's the thing about places like that. They don't chase you. They don't need to. They wait. They remember. Weeks passed. We kept moving. Oregon, Montana, Idaho. Sometimes we'd talk about going home, settling for a while, but we never stayed anywhere longer than a few days. Not because of fear, not exactly, because of curiosity, because part of us still hears that third chair being pulled out. Sometimes I'll glance at the GPS and watch the arrow twitch just for a second, like it's remembering a road that doesn't exist anymore. And every once in a while, when I'm filling up on gas in the middle of nowhere, I'll scan the bulletin boards out front, the old missing person posters, the faded Polaroids of people who vanished between mile markers. And I'll see one I swear we saw in Mercy, different town, different state, but same name, same eyes. And for a moment, the desert is back in my throat. The heat, the silence, the sense that nothing ever really leaves that place, that maybe we didn't either. Not fully. Claire's asleep beside me now, and the stars outside are impossibly bright. We're camped in a real place on a real map, but that doesn't mean we're safe. It just means we've forgotten for a moment. But I'll tell you what I can't forget. It's not the building with the chairs. It's not the names on the wall. It's not even the way the air felt frozen, like we were walking through memory. It's this. When we left Mercy, I looked back once. Just once. And I swear on everything I love, that third chair wasn't empty anymore. Story 2. I don't know how long I stared at that photograph before I understood what I was really looking at. The edges were curled and browned, the image grainy, warped like water damage had bent it into remembering something wrong, but it was unmistakably us. Me. Leah. Our RV. And in the background, right behind the fire pit we'd built just hours before, was a figure that hadn't been there when the photo was taken. A figure half buried in the dirt, like it was crawling up from under the sand, frozen mid-reach. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The truth is, I didn't want to go to the Salton Sea. Leah had found the spot online. Some blog post from a retired couple who called it eerily peaceful and a forgotten gem of the Southwest. They had this filtered photo of a pink sunset over cracked white shorelines, like it was the last paradise no one knew about. Leah got stars in her eyes, said we'd go off-grid for a few nights, clear our heads, maybe finally talk. I knew what she meant. Things had been off between us. We hadn't really spoken about the miscarriage. Not deeply, not honestly. It lived under the surface of everything, like a bruise we couldn't stop bumping into. So yeah, I agreed. I didn't argue when she packed our gear into the RV. I didn't say anything when we passed through Bombay Beach and I caught that smell for the first time. That weird mix of salt, sulfur, and something sweeter and wrong. I told myself it was just part of the desert. Just part of the deal. We parked right at the edge of a flat patch of hard-packed sand near the shoreline where the beach looked almost skeletal. Fragments of fish bones and broken shells glittering like teeth in the sun. There was no one else around, just the occasional distant hum of a dirt bike or the far-off bark of a stray dog. It was a place that felt like it had been forgotten on purpose. Leah was already out of the RV, taking photos, her boots crunching across the crusted salt. I stayed inside a minute longer, looking out through the cracked windshield. The wind came in low waves, dragging a fine mist of dust over everything. It felt like the ground itself was breathing slow, shallow breaths. I told myself I was imagining things. By sunset, we had a small fire going, just driftwood and brush we'd gathered. The colors were ridiculous, bruised purples and oranges that lit the edges of Leah's face like a painting. She looked beautiful in that kind of dying light. We didn't say much. Just drank lukewarm beer and let the silence stretch long and heavy. Then she said it. I had a dream about this place, she said quietly, like she was afraid it would sound crazy out loud. A few months ago. I blinked. What do you mean, this place? She didn't look at me. I mean, exactly this. Us. The fire. That ridge of rocks over there and something buried. That last part stuck in my head like a thorn. I tried to laugh it off. You sure it wasn't just déjà vu? She didn't answer. Just stared into the flames like she was trying to remember more than she wanted to. Later that night, long after she'd gone to sleep, I stood outside the RV with a flashlight. I don't know what drew me out. The night was thick with silence, almost oily, like sound didn't travel right out there. I heard something then, a crunch, faint, not far off, like footsteps in dry earth. I called out. Nothing answered. Then I saw it, half buried under the sand just a few feet from where we parked. It was sticking out at an angle like it had been shoved into the ground and forgotten. A Polaroid photo, edges curled with age. I knelt to pick it up, brushing off the fine grit clinging to its surface. And I saw it. Us. That same photo I told you about, except I hadn't taken it. Neither had Leah. And that figure in the background, it hadn't been there earlier. I told myself it was a trick of the light, that someone had planted it. A prank. Maybe a leftover from some burned-out photographer who used this place for an art project. But something about the way it was buried, angled downward like it had been pushed up from underneath, it made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't explain. I didn't show it to Leah the next morning. I shoved it in the glove compartment and tried to forget, but the ground didn't forget. The next day was hotter, somehow. The kind of heat that feels like it gets under your skin, soaking in through your pores, clogging your breath. We didn't say much. Both of us felt it, that weight, that presence. I thought about leaving, but I didn't want to be the one who chickened out. Leah was humming to herself by mid-morning, walking the shoreline barefoot, snapping more photos, and then she found the first hole. It was shallow at first, maybe a foot deep, like someone had been digging and gave up halfway. But the sand around it was disturbed and the edges were dark with moisture. Leah stood over it with this weird look on her face, like she was trying to place a half-forgotten memory. "There's something down there," she whispered. "I can feel it." "Leah, don't." But she was already kneeling, scooping sand away with her hands. Her fingernails tore on something hard and jagged. She hissed in pain, pulling back, a thin smear of blood across her palm. I looked down into the hole and saw what she'd hit. A wooden handle, splintered, weathered, the kind of wood that's been in the ground for years. It looked like part of a box, or maybe a coffin. I reached for her hand, pulled her up. "We're done here," I said. "We're leaving. Now." But she wouldn't move. She just stared at the ground like it had whispered her name. That night, she didn't come to bed. I woke up at 2 a.m. and she wasn't beside me. The RV door was open, screen creaking in the wind. I called her name, stepped out barefoot into the sand. The stars were cold and vast above me, and that smell, that rot-sweet stink, was stronger than ever. I followed her footprints down the slope toward the shoreline. And I saw her, digging. She was on her knees, hands raw, covered in dirt up to her elbows. The hole was deeper now, at least 3 feet. She didn't even look up when I came close. "I have to know," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's right here. I feel it. Leah, stop." "I think it's a child," she whispered. I felt my stomach drop. "What?" She looked up at me then, eyes wild, hair stuck to her face. "I keep hearing it cry." Something broke in me then. Not fear, at least not the normal kind. It was a deep, hollow dread that started somewhere behind my ribcage and crawled upward. I grabbed her by the shoulders, tried to pull her back, but she screamed an animal sound, sharp and full of grief. We argued in the dark, our voices cracking through the still air like branches snapping. She kept trying to go back. I told her no. I dragged her into the RV, locked the door, and stood in front of it while she wept on the floor. She didn't sleep. Neither did I. In the morning, we found 3 more holes, and only one of them looked like it had been dug by human hands. They were spread out in a triangle formation, not more than 10 feet from where our RV was parked. Each was slightly deeper than the last, the disturbed earth around them still soft, like they'd been dug while we slept. But what rattled me most, what sent a cold iron nail straight through the center of my chest, was that one of the holes had something inside it. Not buried, just placed there, like it was waiting for us. A doll. Sun-bleached, eyeless, its cloth face torn open like something had tried to crawl through it. The stitching across its chest had rotted open, revealing stuffing soaked in something dark. At first, I thought it was dirt, but when I leaned closer, the smell hit me. Not earth, not mildew, something coppery, something that turned the back of my throat raw with nausea. Leah didn't speak. She just stood behind me, barefoot in the dust, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to keep something in. We left the doll where it lay, but that was the moment I realized we were wrong to stay. This place didn't want us here. Or worse, it wanted us for something. The wind picked up as we packed, not hard, but constant. It wasn't the kind of gusts that scatter sand across your boots or tug at the edges of a tarp. It was thin and whispering, like it was sifting through things. Searching. By the time I turned the ignition, the RV felt like a coffin on wheels. I didn't even bother latching the gray water tank. I just wanted to go. But the engine stuttered, then died. I tried again. Dead clicks. Just that dry, hollow sound like the key was turning inside a corpse. I swore under my breath, stepped out. Popped the hood. The battery was fine. Connections good. No obvious reason for the failure, no warning lights before this, but the smell under the hood, it wasn't grease or heat. It was the same stink from the holes, that rot sweetness, almost fruity, like a body too long in the sun. Leah was staring at something across the sand. "Leah?" I called. She didn't answer, just stepped off the RV's metal step, walking slowly like she was sleepwalking. I followed her gaze. Another photo. This one had been left upright, propped gently against a smooth stone, as if someone wanted to make sure we'd find it. I picked it up with shaking hands. It showed Leah standing alone in front of the RV, her back to the camera, her hands smeared with dirt. The shoreline behind her was wrong, angled upward like a wave frozen mid-crash. But there was no ocean anymore, only sand, only bones. And then I noticed the timestamp at the bottom. It was tomorrow's date. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Leah. We sat opposite each other in the RV's small booth, the old lantern casting long shadows on our faces. I couldn't tell if we were awake or trapped inside some collective nightmare. We didn't speak much. There wasn't much left to say. At 2:17 a.m., I heard scratching. Not loud, just soft, deliberate. It came from beneath the RV. I froze, held my breath. Leah didn't seem to hear it. Her eyes were shut, lips moving like she was praying or whispering to someone I couldn't see. I stepped lightly to the door, careful not to let it creak. The air outside was thick with haze, the kind that settles when something is burning far off. The desert was dead quiet, no insects, no birds, not even wind. I crouched low beside the RV, flashlight off, heart knocking like fists in my chest. The sound had stopped. I waited, and then it came again, closer this time. Right beneath me, a long, dragging claw across the undercarriage. I flipped the light on. Nothing. Just sand and shadow. Until I looked to the right. There, at the edge of the last hole, were handprints. 2 of them. Small. Not a child's. Not quite. Just wrong. Too long. Too many joints. The fingers curled inward like they were gripping the edge of the earth, pulling themselves free. I ran back inside, bolted the door behind me, hands shaking. "What is it?" Leah whispered. I couldn't lie anymore. "There's something under us," I said. "Something alive." She nodded like she already knew. In the silence that followed, I realized what it was that haunted me most about this place. It wasn't just that things were appearing or that the dead felt close. It was the way everything pointed downward. The holes, the photos, the dreams. All of it was about descent, as if something was calling not from the skies, but from below. A gravity of rot, a hunger under the crust of the desert. By morning, the RV still wouldn't start. The sand outside was disturbed in wide circles, as if something had moved around us all night. There were no tracks, just soft, collapsing rings, like echoes of footsteps too deep to register. And another hole. This one was under the fire pit we'd built our first night. It was clean, dug in a perfect spiral, a tunnel. Leah stood at its edge. "We have to finish it," she said softly. I pulled her back. She didn't fight me this time, just sat in the sand and wept. That afternoon, I tried to hike toward the nearest road. My GPS was useless, stuck buffering, map flickering, no signal. The heat was like a wall. My skin blistered. My water ran out fast. And when I finally crested the ridge that should have revealed the highway, there was nothing. No road, no cars, just more sand, more empty. The same ridge line. I'd come full circle. That was when I knew we weren't just being watched. We were being contained. The desert had swallowed us. I didn't tell Leah what I'd seen. Not at first. She was already drifting, slipping further into some quiet, hollowed-out version of herself. I couldn't take her hope away. Not yet. But that night, the sand outside the RV moved again. We heard it at the same time, long, scraping pushes across the surface, circling the RV in slow, uneven spirals. No footsteps, no voices. Just that dry, grating drag, like a burlap sack full of teeth being pulled in the dirt. This time, we didn't turn on lights. We just sat in the dark, clutching each other's hands so tight it hurt. I didn't blink for nearly an hour. Just stared at the door, waiting for a shadow to fall across the frosted window. None did. The sound stopped around 3 a.m. We didn't sleep, just sat there, trying not to breathe too loud. And then right before dawn, something knocked, not on the door, from underneath. 1, 2, 3 soft thuds like knuckles tapping the metal floor beneath our feet. Leah didn't flinch. She just whispered, "It's ready." I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. She opened the cabinet beneath the booth and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A shovel. Small, old, the kind with a wooden handle and a rusting blade. Where she'd found it, I couldn't say, but it looked like it had already been used. She walked outside barefoot. I followed her, dizzy with sleep-deprived nausea and dread. She walked straight to the newest hole, the spiral one, and she started to dig. I tried to stop her, but the moment I touched her arm, she turned and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "This is where it ends," she said. "It has to come out." I didn't understand, and maybe I didn't want to, because in that moment I felt it too. Some awful certainty that something was beneath us, something old and waiting, and it wasn't content to stay buried anymore. But I couldn't let her do it alone, so I picked up the second shovel. The air grew colder the deeper we dug. Not cooler, colder, like there was a pocket of winter beneath the Salton Sea, and we were unsealing it inch by inch. After the 5th foot, we hit something hard. Not rock. Wood. A corner. A box. We cleared the earth around it in silence, not because we agreed not to speak, but because neither of us could find the words. It was a coffin. Small, maybe 4 feet long, soaked through with a black sap that oozed from the grain like it was bleeding. The moment we uncovered the lid, the flies came. Silent at first, then buzzing. Hundreds of them, pouring from the hole in a storm cloud of wings and decay. They didn't bite. They didn't land. They just hovered, watching. Leah reached down and pried the lid open with the edge of the shovel. I stepped back. Inside the box wasn't a body. It was a mirror. Old, cracked, framed in the same black rot that covered the wood. But the surface was clean. Too clean. And when I looked in, I didn't see my reflection. I saw the RV burning. Smoke curling into a starless sky, flames licking at the desert, and someone, me, screaming from inside, clawing at the windows. Leah leaned in, looked into it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said, "That's how it ends then." I slammed the lid shut, buried the mirror again with wild, frantic shovels full of dirt, not stopping until it was deep enough that I couldn't feel its pull anymore. But something had shifted in Leah. From that moment on, she wouldn't come inside the RV. She said it didn't feel safe anymore. Said it was marked. Instead, she built a circle of stones about 30 feet away and slept inside it each night. I tried to stay out there with her, but she wouldn't let me. She said I had to keep the seal, whatever that meant. I stopped arguing. I was too tired. The nights after that were worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard scratching inside the RV this time. Inside the walls, the roof, under the sink. It never happened while I was awake, only when I drifted. The moment I snapped back to full consciousness, it stopped, but the smell never left, that rot, that sweetness, like something had died under our bed and was waiting to be acknowledged. And then the dreams started. In them, I was always alone, walking the shoreline, digging. I'd find bones, teeth. Sometimes I'd find the doll again. Sometimes it was Leah's voice calling me from deep underground, and in every dream, the Salton Sea was full again. But the water was black. One night, I woke up standing outside, barefoot, halfway through digging a new hole. I didn't remember getting up, didn't remember walking outside. The shovel was in my hands. My fingers were raw, dirt under every nail. I was maybe 3 feet down. Leah was watching me from the stone circle. She didn't look scared, just tired. "You're dreaming now," she said. I dropped the shovel, ran to her, collapsed at her feet. She held my head in her lap and whispered something over and over. I don't know what language it was. It wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. But it calmed me. The next morning, the RV started. Just like that. No clicks, no delay. The engine turned over like nothing had ever been wrong. The dashboard blinked to life. Everything worked. But we didn't leave. I don't know why. It felt unfinished, like the desert was holding its breath. We didn't speak much after that. Leah kept to her circle. I stayed near the RV, and each day, new holes appeared. Dozens, like the land was unraveling beneath us. Some were shallow, some were deep enough that I couldn't see the bottom, and at the edge of every hole, a photo, each one closer to real time, closer to now. Some were of us asleep, others showed the inside of the RV from impossible angles, like someone had been standing just behind me while I cooked, or watching Leah as she braided her hair. But the last one showed something else entirely. It wasn't a photo of us, it was a photo of the land, long, cracked, and empty, and in the center of it stood a shape, tall, thin, faceless. Its body was made of earth and bone, its arms like roots curling into the sky, no eyes, no mouth. But somehow it was looking, and I swear to you, it looked familiar, like something I'd seen before, something I'd buried. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I told Leah we had to leave, that no matter what was unfinished, no matter what we had uncovered, we had to go before it got worse, before it got into us. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the horizon where the last shimmer of light sank into the dust. Then she looked at me, not like a partner, not like someone who shared my life, but like someone trying to remember who I was, or whether I'd already changed. "You don't come back from this," she said. "Even if we drive away, something followed us in." "I don't care," I said. "We'll put miles between us and this place. Burn the map if we have to. Never speak of it again." She smiled, soft and sad. "You still think this is about the land?" And that was when she handed me the final photograph. It hadn't been there earlier that day, not in any of the new holes. This one she'd found tucked behind her pillow, inside the RV. The photo showed me, alone, sitting in the driver's seat, covered in ash, eyes blackened, mouth slack, staring forward with nothing behind the eyes. The windshield was cracked, and outside the desert was on fire. But Leah wasn't in the photo at all. I held it in my hands, and for the first time since arriving at the Salton Sea, I felt something break. Not snap like a sudden crisis, but sink, a realization like lead pouring into my veins. The story didn't end with us escaping. It ended with me surviving. Alone. I didn't believe in premonitions. I still don't. But that photo was no dream. I still have it. Folded, creased, dirt-stained. I've looked at it every day since. The scene hasn't changed. And that night, after Leah went back to her circle and I locked the RV door behind me, something inside the rig shifted. It felt like a breath, one long, slow inhale from somewhere in the floorboards. Then came the knock again. Not under the RV this time. Inside. I checked every cabinet, every drawer, opened the fridge, even pulled the mattress off the frame. Nothing. Until I opened the access panel beneath the sink and found the mirror again. Not buried, not imagined. Sitting right there, whole and untouched, as if it had been waiting. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. I stared into it, and this time, the image didn't flicker. It showed Leah curled in her stone circle asleep, and something kneeling beside her. Tall, lanky, a figure with arms too long and skin stretched thin like plastic over bone. It leaned down, pressed its face to hers, and then it turned to look at me. That's when I threw the mirror out the door, slammed it into the dirt so hard it cracked, but the reflection stayed. No glass, just shimmer, like the air itself was reflecting things now. I ran to Leah. She was ice cold, not dead, breathing, but shallow, almost too still, like her body had made a choice to keep going even if her spirit had stepped out for a bit. I carried her into the RV, locked every door, piled what little salt we had across every windowsill, every vent, every crack in the walls, lit the emergency candles and made a ring of fire around the entry, and then I sat there, shotgun in my lap, eyes on the door, for what felt like a week. That's when the humming started. Low, vibrating through the bones of the RV, not mechanical, not electrical, a tone, alive, like someone dragging the edge of a tuning fork across the world. It got louder and deeper. So deep I felt it in my spine, in my teeth, in the blood behind my eyes. And then it stopped. Dead silence. Leah gasped awake and screamed. It wasn't just a panic scream. It was recognition. Like she'd come back from somewhere she never wanted to be and saw something in this world that matched what she'd left behind. She gripped my arm, fingers bruising my skin. "We have to go." Now. I didn't ask questions. I didn't pack. I turned the ignition and peeled out so fast I kicked a dune of white dust behind us. The RV bounced and rocked over the rutted road, but I didn't slow down. We didn't speak again until we hit the highway. Even then, the silence felt thick, greasy, like the desert was still under our fingernails, in our teeth, behind our eyes. We made it to a diner 50 miles north, somewhere near Mecca, parked under the flickering fluorescent lights and just sat there for a while, letting our hands stop shaking. Leah finally whispered, "It wasn't just buried out there, it's buried in us." I looked at her. Her eyes were darker than I remembered, less light behind them. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. My stomach dropped. It was the mirror. Only now it was just black glass, no reflection, no shimmer, just cold, dead weight. "I tried to leave it," she said. "It won't let me." I didn't know what to say. Still don't. That was 2 weeks ago. We haven't gone back, but we haven't been the same either. Every time I park somewhere quiet, I hear the knock again. Just once. Just enough to remind me it's still there. And the photo, the one of me alone, it keeps changing. The fire's gone now, but there's a new figure in the passenger seat. Thin, tall, covered in dust. It doesn't have a face, but I swear I know who it is. And that's the thing no one tells you about camping in the desert, especially places like the Salton Sea. Some things you find aren't meant to be uncovered. Some things that rot, they remember who buried them. And sometimes the desert doesn't want you to leave. Sometimes it follows you home. We drove for days. No music, no podcasts, just the road and the endless desert scraping by outside our windows. There was no destination in mind, only a way. We slept in rest stops and behind abandoned gas stations somewhere east of Joshua Tree. It didn't matter how far we ran. I think we both knew the truth, somewhere deep down in the part of your gut that whispers when your mind's too proud to listen. You don't drive away from something like that. You carry it. The desert doesn't hold you with ropes or chains. It lingers in the quiet corners of your mind, sits on your chest when you try to sleep, plays with time, with memory, until you aren't sure if what happened was real, or if you just dreamed the rot and the mirrors and the photo that told the future. But the dirt under my fingernails is real. The mirror is still in the drawer beneath the stove. Leah says she tried to toss it into the Colorado River, says it washed back up before she made it to the end of the dock. We stopped talking about it after that. I started looking up things late at night while she sleeps. Historical documents, land surveys, local stories, what few there are, buried in forums and obscure books about California's forgotten places. The Salton Sea was never meant to be a sea at all, a flood mistake, a man-made oasis that rotted before it ever bloomed. They dumped millions of fish in there once, decades ago, thought they could make it a tourist paradise. The fish died by the billions, bloat and bones and sour wind. Some people say the sea was cursed long before that the local tribes never camped there, not even in drought. Called it a place of echoing grief. Said the ground remembers everything, every burial, every betrayal, every soul that tried to walk away without paying what it owed. And now I wonder, what did we disturb? Was it already dying, or did we give it a reason to wake up? I can't sleep most nights. When I close my eyes, I hear that hum, that deep tone that seems to come from inside my bones. And worse, I see myself, the me from the photo, sitting behind the wheel, slack-jawed, a man who's lost every fight he ever meant to win, a man who kept driving after everyone else had disappeared. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still him now. If the life I'm living is just the aftermath of the moment I broke, maybe I never drove away. Maybe I'm still back there, still digging, still kneeling in the white ash, asking the desert what it wants from me. But then Leah will roll over in her sleep and whisper something I can't quite hear. Sometimes my name, sometimes not. And I remember we didn't go looking for answers. We went looking for peace. But the Salton Sea doesn't give peace. It gives silence, the kind that creeps in like mold, the kind that changes the shape of your thoughts. I asked Leah once, Why do you think it showed us that photo? Why did it give us warnings instead of just taking us? She just looked out the window and said, because it wants company. And I haven't asked her anything since. We still drive, still camp. But never near salt, never near dead lakes, never near places where the map feels ashamed to label anything. And I've started noticing things now. People at other campsites who stare a little too long into the fire, who dig holes that don't look like they're for fun, who wake up in the middle of the night and just stand there watching the horizon like something's calling them. Sometimes they look at me, and sometimes they look like me, like I used to be, before the knock, before the photo, before I saw something move in the reflection of a mirror that wasn't mine. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that not all buried things want to stay buried. Some memories come back up, whether you dig for them or not. Some places don't want you to forget what happened there. And sometimes when you camp near the edges of America, places that were never meant to be filled with people, you find out just how thin the skin of the world really is. You peel it back, even a little, and the rot breathes back. So if you're ever tempted to camp near the Salton Sea, don't. Not just for the stench, not just for the heat, but because something down there knows your name before you arrive, and it doesn't want you to leave empty-handed. It'll offer you silence. Show you something you were never meant to see, and if you're not careful, you'll bring it home with you. Story 3. You never forget the sound of snow when there's no wind. It's a kind of silence that eats into your chest, not peaceful, not beautiful, just vast, like the land itself is holding its breath. That's what I remember most about that night. Not the fear, not the blood, not even the scream, just the quiet. My name is Cole Patterson. I was 35 when I decided to take some time off work, 6 months give or take, to live the RV life full time. I'd been grinding away in Denver, splitting time between a job that no longer meant anything and a condo that never quite felt like home. And I'd hit that point where everything just felt still. Not calm, just hollow. My girlfriend Ray was the one who first floated the idea of taking the camper into the Rockies for the winter. She grew up outside of Aspen, so she thought she knew the mountains like they were old friends. I grew up in Tucson, so the only snow I knew came in bags from ski resorts or from the sky 2 days a year. But I trusted her, and maybe I trusted that something out there might finally pull me out of the fog I'd been living in. So we packed up our Class C, kissed the city goodbye, and drove west. We weren't reckless. We prepped. Chains for the tires, solar panels, satellite phone, backups for our backups. We stocked up on propane, food, and firewood, and mapped out campsites that were still open, even if just unofficially, during the winter. Ray's dad had taught her how to track elk, how to build a fire in sleet, how to read the wind like scripture. I felt safe with her. Safer than I ever had anywhere else, truth be told. We made our way into the heart of the Rockies by early December, found a place tucked deep off a forest road near Leadville. There were no other RVs in sight, just frost-bitten trees, sheets of white draped across the valley, and the kind of sky that only shows itself when it thinks no one's watching. At night, we'd hear the wind run its fingers through the pines. Sometimes we'd catch the echo of coyotes down by the ridge. But that first week, it was quiet, still and cold and clear. Then something changed. It started with the prints. Ray noticed them first, out near the edge of the tree line behind our RV. I thought they were elk at first, long stride, deep press in the snow, but Ray crouched beside them and shook her head. "They're wrong," she said. "How wrong?" I asked. "They're off. Look at the spacing. No drag between steps, and they're too long. Elk don't move like this." I tried to brush it off. "Maybe a hiker?" I offered. "Someone on snowshoes?" She gave me a sharp look. "Who hikes out here in sub-zero temps without making a sound?" She had a point. There were no other tire tracks on the access road, no fresh snowmobile trails, nothing but our own footprints and those other ones. That night, I didn't sleep much, not from fear, not yet, but something close. My brain was chewing on the edges of something it couldn't quite name. I stared at the ceiling of the RV, listening. The furnace cycled on and off like a heartbeat. Ray was curled beside me, yet warm and still. But outside, the silence felt less like calm and more like watching. The next day, we hiked a little ways into the forest to get firewood. The tracks were still there. They led deeper into the trees, long single-file impressions in the snow like something walking upright but unnaturally heavy. No animal I knew made prints like that. But what really made me stop was how they circled. They looped back, right behind the RV, right to our window. Ray didn't say much when we got back. She just looked at the trail, then at me, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. Something had been watching us sleep. That night, the wind picked up. Not a gentle moan, but a wailing, sharp and keening, like something being pulled apart. The RV rocked slightly, not much, but enough that I got up to check the stabilizers. That's when I saw them. Eyes, reflecting from the tree line. They were too high up, too far apart, and they didn't blink, just hovered, watching. I couldn't make out a shape, couldn't tell how far. But something about them, that amber glow, it burned into my brain like a brand. Not animal, not entirely. I didn't wake Ray, I should have. I just closed the blind and sat in the dark for another hour, heart doing double time, ears straining for every sound. I told myself it was probably a deer, maybe a moose, but I knew better. The next day, we found something in the snow. A dead fox at maybe 30 feet from the RV. Its body was torn open, but not eaten. No blood on the ground. No tracks around it. Just the corpse, like it had been placed there. Ray stood over it for a long time. She didn't say anything, just stared, her breath fogging up in the cold. I wanted to say something comforting, something rational, but the words felt fake even before they hit my tongue. We left the fox where it lay. By evening, Ray suggested we pack up and move. Just a few miles, she said, just to shake the feeling. I agreed without argument. But that night, even parked 15 miles down the ridge, I saw the same eyes. They found us again. I told myself I was dreaming. That's what people do when they're scared and tired and desperate for some kind of grip on reality. I watched those glowing eyes outside the window for maybe 30 seconds before they disappeared. No movement, just gone. Swallowed up by the trees again. I didn't say anything to Ray that morning. She was quieter than usual, but I could tell she'd made up her mind, the same way I had. Whatever had followed us from that first spot hadn't just stumbled upon us. It knew where we were going. Or worse, it already knew where we'd be. The problem was we were boxed in by weather. A storm had rolled in during the night, and even with chains on the tires, our RV was basically stuck unless we wanted to risk sliding off a cliffside or getting stranded mid-turn on a one-lane forest road. The snow was dumping fast. By noon, we couldn't even see the highway markers on the GPS. The signal cut out. The sky turned that dead gray color that looks like steel wrapped in ice. We were stuck. And something out there knew it. Ray was pacing by the door. I'd never seen her nervous like that before. She was always the calm one, like the steady hand in a crisis. But now, she kept glancing at the windows, like expecting to see those eyes again. I asked her what she was thinking. She just shook her head and said, "It's watching. I don't know how, but it is." I checked the propane. We had about 3 days left if we rationed. Firewood would get us a bit farther, but the way the storm was coming in, we wouldn't last out there without heat for long. We decided to conserve what we could and run the generator only at night. That first night after relocating, we heard it. Not animals. Not wind. Footsteps. They crunched slow and methodical outside the RV. The snow was thick, so every step sounded heavier, like something massive pushing down into it. Not galloping. Not four-legged. Walking. I turned off the cabin lights and sat in the dark. Ray was already holding the hatchet we kept by the door. She was breathing slow through her nose, like she was trying to silence even her lungs. The footsteps circled the RV once, then again, then stopped, right at the back door. I don't know how long we sat like that. 5 minutes? 20? I heard nothing else. Not a scratch, not a knock, not even breathing. Just Silence. Heavy and watching. Like whoever or whatever it was wanted us to know it was there, wanted us to feel it. Eventually, Ray whispered, "It's not snowshoeing. You hear that?" I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand. "No drag," she said. "Nothing breaking the crust. It's not human, but it wants us to think it might be." The footsteps didn't come back that night, but in the morning, the prints were there. Same shape, same long stride, same unnatural symmetry. They stopped at the door and then vanished, like whatever it was never left. We lasted 2 more days before I snapped. I couldn't sit inside that RV with Ray silently reading weather charts while I felt the pressure of those woods coiling around us like rope. Something out there was toying with us, and I needed to look it in the face. "I'm hiking out," I told her. "Just to the ridge. If I can get a signal, I'll ping the ranger station." Ray looked at me like I'd just declared war. "You hike out in this storm, you're either getting buried or taken, and I'm not digging you out alone." "I won't go far," I said. 1 hour, I just need to try." She didn't argue, but I could see the panic she was trying to swallow. She helped me pack a small day bag, emergency flare, hand radio, thermos pistol, and she made me promise to turn back if the snow started falling again. I followed the prints. Not on purpose at first. They were just there. They led away from the RV and into the deeper part of the forest. The trees were thinner here, twisted and bare like bones. I kept telling myself this was stupid, that whatever was out here had every advantage. It knew the terrain, the weather, probably even our scent. But still, I walked. About half a mile in, the prints stopped. They didn't turn. They didn't fade. They just ended. No broken branches, no marks on the snow where something turned around, just a set of tracks that vanished like smoke. That's when I smelled it. Rot. Not fresh death, not roadkill or predator kill, but something old. Wet. Mildewed. Like flesh left out in damp fabric. I scanned the trees. I couldn't see anything, but the smell got thicker, heavier, like something breathing through the snow. And then I heard it. Not footsteps this time, not animal calls, laughter, a low, raspy chuckle that didn't echo. It was behind me. I turned fast, pulled the pistol, shouted something I don't even remember. The woods were still, too still. And then I saw it. A shape, not tall but narrow, all angles and pale skin, pressed between 2 trees like it had grown there. I thought it was a branch until it moved. Not toward me, but up. It climbed. No sound, no snow falling, just this thing rising. I ran. I've never run like that in my life. Didn't care about the flare, didn't care about falling. My legs were ice, my lungs felt like they were burning through glass. I kept waiting to hear it behind me, to feel claws on my back or breath on my neck. But nothing came. I made it back to the RV just before dusk. Ray opened the door, wide-eyed and ready to swing the hatchet. When she saw me, she pulled me in and locked the deadbolt so fast it nearly cracked. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just collapsed onto the floor and nodded. Ray didn't press. She just knelt down beside me and put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time I realized how cold I was. My face burned, my fingers stung, my boots were soaked through with snow and something darker I didn't want to think about. "I saw it too," she whispered. "Last night." I turned to her and her eyes were glassy, red-rimmed from holding in too much. "What did you see?" She didn't answer right away. She stood and walked to the back window, pulled aside the thermal curtain just a fraction, and stared into the trees. "It crouched by the fire ring," she said. Just crouched, watching, like it was remembering something. Did it try to come closer? No, it didn't have to. I already felt it in here. She tapped her chest, just over her heart. There's a kind of silence that happens in winter that's not like any other time of year. It's the kind that doesn't just surround you, it settles inside you. That was the silence we sat in for the next few hours. We didn't speak, we didn't turn on lights, we just waited. For what, I don't know. When night came, it brought no footsteps, no knocks, no signs, just the sound of wind crawling over the windows, brushing the glass like fingertips. But sleep doesn't last in places like that. It was around 2 a.m. when the banging started. Not on the RV, under it. 4 hard, deliberate thuds from beneath the floor. Then silence. I held my breath, and in that silence I heard Ray mutter, "It's under us." I grabbed the pistol again and flicked on the undercarriage lights. Nothing. The snow was untouched. We both went out anyway, side by side, backs to each other, checked the tires, the axles, the roof, everything. But we were alone. That's when Ray turned and pointed. At the ridge above us, maybe 100 feet up, a shape was watching. Again, no movement. Just standing, limbs too long, skin too pale. Even at that distance, it looked wrong, like a mannequin made of meat. No eyes we could see, just a long, narrow face, almost stretched, like skin over something else. We didn't move, neither did it. We watched each other for a full minute before the clouds passed over the moon. When the light came back, it was gone. The next morning, we found tracks leading from the ridge to our camp, but only one set. And this time, they started under the RV, like it had come from inside the ground. We packed to leave. Didn't talk about it, didn't even say it out loud. We just knew. We were done. Whatever this thing was, it had given us a warning. Or maybe it was waiting to see what we'd do next. We weren't going to stay and find out. But the storm had another idea. A new front had rolled in overnight. The road we used to enter the clearing was gone. The trees were thick. The snow was deeper. I checked the GPS, but it showed nothing. No lines, no directions, just blank space and flickering static. We weren't just snowed in. We were off the map. That night, I made a decision. We couldn't stay in the RV. It was too exposed. Whatever it was had already been beneath it. If it wanted to get inside, it wouldn't take much. Just a slip of patience, a moment of weakness. There was a ranger's cabin about 2 miles east. We'd seen the signs on the way in, abandoned but still standing, probably used in fire season. If we could make it there, we could fortify, maybe find supplies, maybe even a working radio. Ray didn't argue. She packed in 10 minutes. We left a flare on the RV roof in case any snowmobiles passed over. Not that we expected them to, but hope's a funny thing. You cling to it even when everything else is gone. The walk to the cabin felt longer than it should have. The trees closed in more with each step, and the deeper we went, the more we noticed things were wrong. Animal tracks that doubled back, trees with bark peeled away like skin, birds frozen mid-flight in snowdrifts, wings outstretched like they'd fallen straight from the air. But we made it. Just before dusk, we saw the shape of the cabin through the trees. A single-level wood shack with a collapsed chimney and boarded windows. One door. No lock. Inside, it smelled of mildew and old smoke. But it was shelter. There was even a hand-crank radio nailed to the wall, though it hissed more than it spoke. Ray tried anyway. I blocked the windows with overturned furniture. We lit a fire in the steel barrel someone had left behind and settled in. I was half asleep when she said it. "I don't think it followed us." I nodded, eyes closed. But something about that sentence stuck in my head. Followed us. It didn't need to follow. It already knew where we were going. We heard it again that night, not from outside, from inside the walls, scratching, low and rhythmic, like nails on wood. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or squirrel. Old cabins get infested. But this was different. It had been patterns from one end of the room to the other, then above us, then below, and then it knocked 4 times, same as under the RV, and we realized something we hadn't considered before. That knock was its voice. That was how it spoke. And it wasn't just speaking to us, it was answering something else. Because a second knock came from the opposite wall. 2 knocks, then silence. I stood frozen, staring at the opposite wall, waiting. The fire in the barrel had gone low, casting long, twitching shadows across the cabin walls. I remember thinking how unnatural the silence felt, like it wasn't just quiet, it was listening. And then it came again. 1 knock, then a pause, then 4 more, faster, angrier, like a reply. Ray turned to me. "There's more than one." I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to believe it. One was already too much. One thing out there that knew how to watch, how to wait, how to mock human sound. But that was a conversation. I walked to the back window, or where the window had once been before the planks. I pulled a slat loose just enough to see outside. The trees were all shadows now, swaying in the wind. No tracks in the snow. No eyes. No silhouette. But the feeling had changed. Something had entered the clearing. Maybe not with feet, maybe not through the trees, but it was there. I could feel it. In the marrow of my bones. In the way my thoughts grew scattered and my breath came faster, shallower. It was watching again, but this time I couldn't tell from where. That's when Ray said, "I don't think they're waiting anymore." I looked back at her and I swear her skin looked paler, not from fear. From something else, like the warmth was leaving her, being pulled out through her fingers. I grabbed her hands, ice cold. "You're not going back out there," I said. "I wasn't planning to." She pulled away slowly and walked over to the radio. Still static. She turned the dial, nothing but hissing, the occasional crackle, until suddenly, a voice. "Repeat, do not remain in structures overnight. Do not shelter in place. They mimic sound. They learn patterns." It cut out. Static. Then, avoid verbal communication. They remember voices. Repeat, they remember voices. Then silence. Dead air. The barrel fire flared suddenly and the back wall shook. Not a knock. Not scratching. It shook, as if something had slammed against it from outside with both arms. Ray screamed. I raised the pistol, but the sound was gone. No second slam. No repeat. But now the fire wouldn't stop rising. The flames twisted upward higher than they should have, and I saw that the heat wasn't coming from wood anymore. Something was fueling it. A blackened sludge that had pooled in the bottom of the barrel, and I don't know how it got there. We backed toward the door. Then another slam, this time from the roof. Snow caved inward. Boards cracked. Dust and soot rained down in the center of the room. Something was up there, crawling, fast, frantic. I could hear its fingers, long, jointed, uneven, clicking against the wood. It wasn't trying to get in, it was trying to trap us. I yanked open the cabin door and pulled Ray out into the snow. We didn't look back. We ran. I don't know how long we ran, maybe a mile, maybe two, but the woods didn't look familiar anymore. The trees were all too close, growing at strange angles. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Ray stumbled. I caught her. She was shivering violently. "We need shelter," she choked out. I saw a rock outcropping ahead, steep and low, with an overhang we could crawl under. Not perfect, but it would shield us from the sky. We crouched beneath it and stayed there. Listening. That's when we started to hear them. Not footsteps, not animal sounds. Voices. Human voices. Whispering. Calling. "Help, I'm lost. I'm cold, please. Is someone there?" But the cadence was wrong. Too slow. Too deliberate, like a child reciting lines in a play. Then one of them said Ray's name. And not just said it, spoke it like I would. Same pitch, same tone. She clutched my arm so hard I thought she'd draw blood. "Don't answer it," I said. "No matter what you hear, don't speak." More voices joined. All around us, in the trees, in the wind. They started repeating things we'd said, from the RV, from the cabin, even things we'd whispered, private things. That was when I understood. They weren't just mimicking, they were learning us, piece by piece, echo by echo. We stayed under that rock all night. Too afraid to sleep, too afraid to speak. By morning, the voices had stopped. But the damage was done. We weren't the same after that. Ray's hands were frostbitten. My boots had holes. We were dehydrated, disoriented. I couldn't remember which way was north anymore, and the GPS was still showing blank. We followed the light the best we could. Around midday, we heard a sound that didn't belong. A hum, low and steady. Engines, snowmobiles, 2 of them, coming down the ridgeline. We jumped out into the clearing and waved them down, screamed with everything we had left. They saw us, turned, slowed. They were real. 2 rangers, older men, one black, one white, both armed, both looked at us like we were ghosts. "How long you been out here?" one of them asked. 4 days, I said. "Maybe 5. The other ranger frowned. "Impossible. This road's been closed since January. No one's been out here in weeks." I didn't argue. I didn't care. They brought us back. I never looked back at the woods. But Ray did. She said she saw something watching from the trees. We didn't tell the full story at the ranger station. Who would believe it? They thought we'd gotten turned around in the storm. Hypothermia, hallucinations, dehydration. We didn't argue. We didn't need to prove anything. But we know. And I haven't gone back to the Rockies since. Haven't driven that route. Haven't booked a site anywhere within 200 miles of that forest. Not because I'm scared of bears or weather or getting lost, but because I know they're still out there, mimicking, learning, waiting, and the next person might not leave in time. She's alive. She functions. But something in her was changed by that winter. Not broken exactly, just muted. The fire she used to have when we'd set out on a new route, that spark in her eyes when we'd find a forgotten road winding into a pristine slice of nowhere, it's gone. She doesn't like silence anymore. We used to savor it on the road, waking up in the RV with nothing but birdsong and the smell of pine. Now she sleeps with earbuds in, white noise humming all night. She says she gets dreams otherwise, dreams where the trees lean in too close and voices call out to her in my voice, or worse, in hers. I get them too, sometimes. Not often. Just enough to remind me. They never come as nightmares. Not at first. They always start like real memories. I'm back in the cabin, the fire's burning low and Ray's by the door, bundled up. But then I hear a knock, and when I look at her, she's already watching me, like she heard it first. And when I open the door, it's me standing outside, smiling, just smiling. And I always wake up in a sweat, my heart going like a drum in a canyon, and for a split second, I swear I still hear the echo of a knock on the RV door. We sold that RV a few months after the incident, bought a newer one, bigger, brighter. Ray insisted. More windows, more sunlight. I didn't object, even though I knew deep down it wouldn't make a difference. Because the thing is, the wilderness isn't just out there. Once it finds a crack in you, it comes with you. I still camp. I still drive. I still park by rivers and pullouts and scenic loops. But I never camp above 7,000 feet anymore. I never camp in winter. And I never ignore that feeling when the hairs on my neck stand up, even when there's nothing around. Especially when there's nothing around, because that's when they come. That's when the forest starts to remember you. And not in a poetic welcome back kind of way. I mean it literally. You leave behind your voice in those woods, your words, your shape, and sometimes the forest tries it on just to see how it fits. I spoke to one of the rangers again months later. I tracked him down. The older one, name was Cal, quiet guy, retired just after that winter. I drove 3 states to buy him coffee. He didn't ask why I wanted to talk. He just listened. I told him everything, not with drama or exaggeration, just the facts, what we saw, what we heard, what followed us. I thought he might laugh or shake his head. Instead, he nodded, very slowly, and said, "You know what we used to call that stretch up past the lake?" I waited. The Echo Woods. That's all he said. No explanation. But his eyes told me he'd seen it too. There's something about the Rockies, about the way sound moves through them. It doesn't just bounce back at you. It twists. A bird call will echo 10 different ways depending on the canyon. Your own voice will feel like it's not yours after a while. You can lose your sense of space, of direction, of even time. And when you add snow, insulation, silence, the cold pressing against your thoughts, it opens up cracks, not just in the land, in you. That's what I learned. That's what I tell people now when they ask why I don't camp in the high elevations anymore. I tell them, mountains remember more than you want them to. Some laugh, others nod, but every once in a while, someone gets quiet. And that silence is its own kind of confirmation. So here's what I'll leave you with. If you ever find yourself in the Rockies, parked way off the main road, miles past cell reception, the snow piling up soft and steady on your windshield, don't ignore your instincts. If something feels off, it is. If you hear your name whispered from the trees, don't answer. And if you hear knocking that doesn't belong, don't wait for a second knock, because by then it already knows where you are. And the longer you stay, the more it learns. Your walk, your speech, your fear, your voice. We camped in the Rockies once, but we weren't alone in the snow. And I don't think we ever left that place fully behind, because when you camp that deep in the wilderness, sometimes the wilderness comes back with you. End of script. We camped in the Rockies, but we weren't alone in the snow. Would you like me to help format this into your final YouTube video format, including title card suggestions, thumbnail concept, or intro-outro narration cues? Story 4. The desert doesn't whisper. It waits. It watches you with heat shimmer eyes, breathes with the hush of sand, and when it speaks, it doesn't lie. Not really. That's what I used to believe, anyway. But then came that night when I learned what the desert can sound like when it wants to unmake you, and it didn't growl or howl or scream. It cried. A baby's cry. Thin. Fragile. Echoing through the dark. I wasn't alone when I heard it. My wife Sarah was there beside me. We'd parked our RV in a dusty slice of BLM land west of Quartzsite, Arizona. It was early March, the kind of chilly that clings to your ribs at night but lets the sun bake you by day. We weren't there for adventure. Not really. We were there to get quiet, get away. We were trying clumsily, maybe desperately, to reset a part of our lives that had started to crack. I was 38. She was 35. No kids. Not for lack of trying. We didn't talk much about that anymore. Not directly. Our shared silence on it had grown thick enough to feel like a third passenger in the RV. So we camped, wandered, watched the sky shift shades at dusk. We slept under starlight because artificial light felt like cheating. We ate simply, rice and beans, fire-grilled tortillas, beer gone warm too fast, and we didn't check our phones unless it was absolutely necessary. The spot we'd chosen was a wide, empty basin ringed by low, crumbling ridges. It wasn't a formal campground, just a pullout with enough space for a few RVs, all spaced far apart. No amenities, no cell signal, just how I liked it. Just how we needed it, I thought. There was a dry arroyo that ran behind our rig, and beyond that, nothing but rocks and desert scrub that stretched into a red-gold blur beneath the setting sun. It was the fourth night when things changed. We had a fire going, low and steady. The last orange embers were crumbling to ash as I leaned back in my camp chair, staring up at a sky littered with stars so sharp they looked angry. Sarah sat beside me, her hoodie pulled up, a book balanced on her knees, though I'm not sure she was reading anymore. I was mid-sentence, something stupid about the firewood stack we'd need for tomorrow, when we both froze. We heard it, a baby crying. At first, I thought it was a trick, a coyote maybe. They can sound strange, even human if you catch the right pitch. But this wasn't that. It was a baby. Not shrieking, not wailing, just crying. Soft, frantic. The kind of sound that goes straight through your bones and into the parts of you that are supposed to protect. Sarah's eyes met mine instantly, wide, confused. "Did you?" "Yeah," I said, already standing. We both turned toward the sound. It was coming from beyond the arroyo. Not far, but not close either. 50 yards, maybe. I grabbed the flashlight from the folding table and flicked it on. The beam cut across sagebrush and rock, catching nothing but shifting dust and ghostly shadows. Another cry. Shorter this time. Sarah was already walking toward it. "Wait," I said, following. "Hold on." She didn't stop. She was moving fast now, hands out, like she could somehow will the sound to stay still. I caught up just as we reached the edge of the arroyo. It dipped about 6 feet down, dry as a bone, filled with coarse sand and stones. The flashlight beam caught something pale near the bottom. I stepped closer, a torn bit of cloth, beige or white, half buried in sand. "Is that—" Sarah's voice caught. "It's nothing," I said quickly, too quickly. She crouched, picked it up. It was just a scrap of canvas, weathered, probably from a tarp or a long-forgotten tent, but still her hands trembled. And then, silence. The crying stopped, completely. No wind, no insects, nothing. It felt like the whole desert held its breath. Sarah stood, staring into the darkness. "Where is it?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, "but we should go back." "What if there's a baby out here?" she asked, turning toward me with a look I hadn't seen in a long time, like hope was elbowing its way through the fear. "What if someone abandoned it?" "Sarah," I said carefully, "that doesn't make sense." Her lips pressed tight. She knew I was right, but she didn't move. I scanned the ridge lines with the flashlight again. Nothing. Just boulders and shadows. Then I heard something. Not the baby this time. Something else. Footsteps, behind us, up near the RV. I swung the beam back fast. Nothing. But the sound had been real. Light. Uneven. Like someone trying not to be heard. Sarah turned, and I saw her expression change. Her mouth fell open, her eyes locked on something past my shoulder. I spun to follow her gaze. Still nothing, she pointed. There, by the bushes, something moved. I kept the light steady and walked toward where she pointed, scanning every clump of brush. A jackrabbit shot out, startled, thumping away into the dark. We stood in silence for another few moments. The crying didn't return. The wind didn't rise. Nothing moved. Eventually, we made our way back to the RV, slower than before, glancing behind us more than I'd like to admit. Once inside, we locked the doors. I pulled the curtains. Every single one. Sarah didn't speak. She just sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing the frayed cloth scrap between her fingers like it meant something. I don't think that was a baby, I said finally. What else would it be? She asked, but there was no fight in her voice. A predator, maybe. An animal. Or, I didn't finish the sentence, because there was no explanation that would sit right in my mouth. That night, neither of us slept much. I lay awake, listening for the sound to return, but it didn't. Not until the next night. And that second time, it knew our names. The second time, it was colder. The wind had picked up sometime during the day, carrying grit that hissed against the windows like the desert trying to get in. We spent most of that afternoon pretending like nothing had happened, sitting outside, reading, quietly making lunch. Neither of us mentioned the baby, the cloth scrap, the footsteps. But the silence was heavier than it had been before, and Sarah didn't look me in the eyes much. She kept checking the edges of the arroyo. Not obviously, not like she was searching, but her gaze drifted there, over and over, as though she expected something to crawl out of it. That evening we sat by the fire again, but it didn't feel the same. The glow was too orange, the darkness beyond it too thick. The wind made the flames stutter and cast strange, jerking shadows across the rocks. I kept the flashlight in my lap this time, just in case. Sarah broke the silence. Do you think someone's messing with us? I looked at her. You mean like a prank? She nodded. We're out here alone. Maybe someone knows. Maybe they're trying to scare us. I wanted to agree. I really did. But pranks don't leave perfectly timed cries in the middle of the desert. They don't stop the second you try to find them. And they sure as hell don't. A cry. Just behind us. So sudden, so sharp, it made me drop the flashlight. Sarah was already standing. Her hands flew to her mouth. It was the same sound, but closer, much closer. Like, right behind the RV. I grabbed the flashlight, clicked it on, and stood. Then it cried again. From the other side now. Then again. From farther away. Then closer again. Like it was circling us. Sarah backed toward the RV. No, she said, her voice cracking. That's not a prank. I was already at the door, key in hand. We scrambled in, locked it, and stood frozen just inside, breathing hard, listening. The crying continued, but now it was changing. It didn't sound like just a baby anymore. Not exactly. It still carried that unmistakable pitch, thin and urgent. But something else rode beneath it, something deeper, something that shouldn't have been there, like an echo, but wet. Like something imitating a baby, but forgetting how the human throat really worked. We stayed pressed to the windows, was like staring out into the dark. The flashlight's beam caught nothing, just dust swirling in wind, dry grass bending, a tumbleweed shifting like it might get up and walk. Then, clear as anything we'd ever heard, a voice, a whisper, soft, right outside the RV. Help, help me. Sarah screamed. I jumped back. The voice didn't sound like a child or an adult. It didn't sound male or female. It sounded like a mistake, like words made by something that didn't understand how words worked. Too slow, too careful, as though someone had learned them phonetically but had no idea what they meant. I flicked off the flashlight. We stood in the pitch black, hearts pounding so hard I thought I might black out. The voice came again, this time from the driver's side, just outside the window. Let me in, please. I lunged for the curtains and yanked them shut. Then silence. A long, paralyzing silence. No wind, No footsteps, just the RV groaning in the cold. I don't know how long we stood there. It might have been 10 minutes, it might have been an hour. But eventually I moved. I turned on the smallest light, just enough to see by, and sat down. My knees were shaking. Sarah sat beside me, curling into herself, fists clenched. I whispered, "You heard that too, right?" She nodded. "It knew what we said last night," she whispered back. "It changed. It knew our language. No animal does that. We didn't sleep, not even in shifts. We sat on the RV couch like two statues, waiting for dawn, listening for the cry that never came again that night. But I swear, at some point, maybe just before sunrise, I heard something brush along the RV's siding. A slow drag, like fingers or claws. When morning came, we opened the door together. Nothing, no footprints in the sand, no signs of disturbance, just our fire pit, cold and scattered, and a small object sitting just outside the driver's door. I didn't want to pick it up, but I did. A pacifier, worn, discolored, the rubber tip blackened with age or something else. I held it out to Sarah. She just stared. We packed up that afternoon. I didn't say why. She didn't ask. We just moved, slow and quiet, like something might be watching, and we didn't want to trigger it. We drove 30 miles north to a state-run campground with hookups and lantern poles and other people parked nearby. Families, laughter, radios playing, the kind of noise that made you feel human again. That night, we slept for the first time in days, but I woke up around 2:30 a.m., not to a cry this time, but to the sound of someone knocking, very lightly on our back window. 3 soft knocks, spaced perfectly apart, not hard, not hurried, just deliberate enough to say, "I'm here. I haven't gone far." I lay there, still under the blanket, breathing through my nose so my mouth wouldn't make a sound. My eyes were open. I hadn't dreamed it. I turned my head slightly. Sarah was still asleep, curled on her side. Her breathing was steady. I waited. 30 seconds passed. Maybe a minute. Another knock. This time from the side window. I slipped out of bed and crept toward the front. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't even grab a flashlight. I didn't want to announce anything. Didn't want to signal that I was awake. That I knew. I crouched below the window and slowly, silently lifted the edge of the curtain. Just an inch. Nothing. No one there. But something caught my eye. Something small and pale at the base of the tree near our site. I held my breath. It was another piece of fabric. Torn. Fluttering a little in the breeze. Another scrap from that same faded pattern. Then it happened again. From the other side of the RV. Knock. 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 Not on the door. Not the window. The roof. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. I didn't move. Couldn't. A scuffing noise followed, like something shifting its weight. Then another soft thump. Whatever it was walking across the roof. Slowly, carefully. And that was what made it worse. The carefulness. Like it knew we were inside. Like it wanted us to hear it, but not too much. Just enough to make us doubt. Then a small, subtle creak directly above me, followed by silence. I slid back into the bedroom and lay beside Sarah, trying not to shake. My thoughts weren't racing. They were stuck, circling a single idea I didn't want to say out loud. It followed us. It had been 30 miles through open country. We hadn't seen anyone, no vehicles trailing us, no signs, but it had followed, and it had waited, and now, here it was. Not crying this time, just reminding us that we weren't alone, not anymore. The next morning, I checked the roof. Dust, sand, but no footprints, no scratches, no signs that anything had been there at all. Sarah didn't ask why I was up there. She just watched from the picnic table, arms crossed, hair tied back like she was already preparing to move again. "I think we should keep going," I said. She nodded. "Farther this time." "East?" She nodded again. We drove, long and hard, through Arizona into New Mexico. The roads blurred, the mesas flattened, towns shrank to gas stations, then to nothing. We pulled into a tiny spot near a dry wash outside Lordsburg. It wasn't even a real campground, just a flat turnoff with enough space for the RV and some shade from scraggly cottonwoods. I parked, killed the engine, and sat for a moment, listening. Nothing, but that didn't mean much anymore. Sarah spoke without looking at me. "It's not just the desert." I turned toward her. "What do you mean?" "It's not the place. It's us." We brought it with us, or it chose us, I don't know. You think it's attached to us somehow? I think it's watching, waiting for something. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. That night, the stars were so bright they looked unreal, like a painted ceiling above our heads, and for a moment I thought maybe it was over. Maybe we'd shaken it. Maybe whatever that thing was had grown bored and gone back to wherever it came from. We had dinner by lantern light. We laughed a little. It felt okay. Not normal, but okay, until I went to brush my teeth behind the RV. I was just finishing up when I heard the crunch. Sand, gravel, a footstep, not an animal. Too heavy, too definite. I stood very still. There were no lights behind me, nothing but the open desert stretching back toward a shallow gully. Another footstep. Then something whispered my name. Not in Sarah's voice, not in any voice I recognized. It was too soft, like the words had been pulled apart and rearranged. I turned slowly, heart hammering in my throat. No one. Nothing. Just the open wash, the cottonwoods, and the whisper of wind. But I swear I felt eyes. I backed away, fast, not running, but close. I didn't tell Sarah that night. I just locked every window and every latch and lay there, listening again. The crying didn't return that night. But I woke up with sand on the floor, and handprints, tiny, smeared, on the outside of the back window. The kind of handprints a toddler would make, but smaller, distorted. Too many fingers. We left before sunrise. No coffee, no breakfast. Just pulled the slides in, turned the key, and rolled. I didn't even bother wiping off the back window. I didn't want to touch those prints, didn't want to smudge them, as if they were some kind of evidence, proof that we hadn't just imagined this thing, that it was real, that it had touched us. Sarah didn't speak until we were halfway to truth or consequences. The sky was softening, the horizon glowing pink, and we were both sitting silent in that shell of cold morning dread. I don't think it wants to hurt us, she said. I glanced at her. Her voice wasn't hopeful. It was numb. Like she wasn't trying to convince me of anything, just putting words to a theory that had been festering too long inside her head. You think it's, what? Lost? She shrugged. Maybe. Maybe it's looking for something. Then why follow us? She didn't answer. We pulled into a KOA outside town. Not much, but it had power, water, showers, other people. I figured maybe being around folks again would ease whatever this was. A recalibration. Get our nervous systems out of this stretched, primal place they'd been living in since Utah. That night, we had neighbors, some retirees with folding chairs and one of those bug-zapping lanterns. They smiled, waved, talked about the heat. It was the first time in days I didn't feel like the desert was actively listening to us. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was crouched just out of sight. Not close, but not gone either. Like when you feel a spider in the room, but haven't seen it yet. We went to bed late, lulled by the chatter of nearby campers, the occasional hum of traffic on the distant highway. Noise. Human noise. I clung to it. Sometime after 2 a.m., that changed. Everything stopped. No cars, no wind, no insects, just total unnatural silence. Then I heard it, faint, nearly drowned out by my own heartbeat. A rattle, like plastic tapping against metal. I got up, opened the curtain by the kitchenette, and froze. Hanging from the rearview mirror of the truck parked next to us was a pacifier, the same one I'd found outside our RV in Utah. Same color, same cracking rubber tip. I stood there, staring at it, until the motion sensor light over their door flicked on. Nothing moved, nothing scurried away. But the light didn't click on because of me. Something had triggered it from the far side of their RV. Something that wasn't there anymore. I closed the curtain and sat at the dinette until sunrise. When the couple next door came out, the pacifier was gone. Sarah and I left again that afternoon. We stopped explaining why. We stopped making decisions based on logic. We were just trying to stay ahead of it now, like outrunning smoke. For days, we wandered. Campsites became shorter stays. We stayed away from back roads, away from canyons and washes. I kept checking our tires, convinced there'd be drag marks in the dirt behind us like something was holding on beneath the frame. Sarah barely slept. I'd catch her staring into the dark through the window beside our bed, not moving, not even blinking. Once, just as I was drifting off, I heard her whisper, "It's getting closer." I didn't ask how she knew. I just believed her. We finally made it to White Sands, open, flat, nothing but dunes and sky and wind. I thought maybe the starkness of the place would make it easier to spot, to see if it came again. No shadows to hide in, no trees to whisper through. We found a spot near the edge of the park, legally just outside the border. Remote. Beautiful. Blinding in the daylight. That night, we didn't light a fire. We sat inside with the windows open, listening to the wind rush over the sand, and then just before midnight, we heard it again. But this time it wasn't crying. It was laughing. A tiny, broken giggle, like a baby learning the sound for the first time, except it wasn't right. The rhythm was wrong. The spacing too perfect. The tone didn't shift. It just looped. Like something had heard laughter once and was playing it back. Over and over. Then something brushed against the RV's undercarriage. I grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and stepped outside without thinking. Sarah hissed my name, terrified, but I had to see it. I needed to look it in the face, because if I didn't, I was going to go insane. The wind blew fine white sand across my boots. I circled to the rear. There, something moved. Quick, low. I swung the flashlight. A child? No. A shape the size of a child, but hunched, its back twisted oddly. Arms longer than they should be. It scampered into the dunes and vanished, kicking up sand behind it like an animal. But the trail it left? Not footprints. Handprints. Dozens of them. Like it had crawled the whole way. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Sarah. We sat in the cab with the headlights on, engine idling just in case. She had her knees tucked up against her chest, staring at the dune line ahead like it might move again. Like it would. When the sun finally came up, the handprints were gone. Wind had erased every trace. But I remembered the pattern. I could still see it behind my eyelids, small palms pressed into the sand in a spiral, not a path. It hadn't been crawling toward us. It had been circling, drawing something, marking us. We left without a word. We didn't stop for hours, just miles in silence. We passed signs for Las Cruces, for Deming, for nothing towns I didn't even remember later. Somewhere west of the Organ Mountains, Sarah finally broke the silence. "I had a brother," she said. I didn't look at her. I just listened. He died when I was 8. He was only 2. Drowned in the pool. My dad blamed the babysitter. My mom blamed the gate, and I blamed myself. I was supposed to be watching him. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't know what words were safe anymore. I never talk about it, not even with you. It's like this frozen part of me that's always been there, just locked. She turned toward me now, eyes glossy but dry. But when I first heard the crying, that night in Utah, it sounded like him. Not exactly, but enough to make me think, what if? I gripped the steering wheel harder. "You think this is connected to him?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I don't think it is him, but I think it's using him, like it knows." That made something shift inside me. A slow, sick realization I hadn't let rise until then. This thing wasn't just random. It wasn't just haunting us for sport. It was personal. It was intimate. And that kind of evil doesn't come from nowhere. I started thinking about my own past, what I'd buried, what I'd run from. There was something I hadn't told Sarah either. I didn't want to remember it, but now I didn't have a choice. When I was 10, I saw something in the desert near my grandparents' old ranch in Nevada. I'd wandered too far during a game of hide and seek, ended up in a dry arroyo with strange clawed footprints in the dirt. My cousins called me a liar when I told them. My uncle said it was just coyote tracks, but my grandfather, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a long time, like he knew. That was the same trip he told me a story I never forgot. He said there were old things in the desert, not ghosts, not spirits, mimics, things that saw the inside of your soul and wore it like skin. He said they wait, they watch, and when you're weak enough, when your sorrow is louder than your sense, that's when they come. I'd always thought it was just a weird old story, one of those things grandfathers say after too many beers. But now, After the crying, the handprints, the laughter? Now I wasn't so sure. We camped outside of Alamogordo that night, right at the base of a jagged ridge, sparse, dry, bleached earth and creosote. Sarah and I didn't speak much. We were both thinking it, feeling it, that whatever this thing was, it was unraveling us from the inside, thread by thread. At dusk, we set up a perimeter of salt around the RV. I don't even know why. Something I remembered from a book or a podcast. It felt dumb and desperate, but doing something felt better than doing nothing. We left the interior lights off, sat with the windows cracked, waited. At 11:47 p.m., the crying started again. Not far this time. Close. Right outside. It wasn't loud, just soft little sobs, barely audible over the wind, like a baby trying to catch its breath between gasps. Then, a word. Mama. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She clenched her fists. "It's not him," I said quickly, firmly. "You know that." But her lips were trembling. I stood up, took the flashlight again, and before she could stop me, I opened the door. The crying cut off instantly. The air outside was bone-dry and cold, brushing against my skin like static. I scanned the perimeter, no movement. The salt circle was unbroken. Then I heard it. Behind me, inside. Sarah screamed. I turned and ran back up the stairs into the RV and stopped dead. There, sitting on the floor in front of the bedroom door, was a tiny child. Naked, pale, head bowed, its back moved as it breathed, or shuddered. I raised the flashlight slowly. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Don't," Sarah whispered from the corner. "Don't look at its face." But I had to. I stepped closer. It looked up, and I'll never forget what I saw. Its eyes weren't human, not even close. They were wide and black and wet like glass marbles, but flat. No light inside them, just reflection. Its mouth hung slightly open, too wide, no teeth, just a wet, gaping grin that didn't match the sadness in its cries. And in that moment, it smiled like it recognized me, like it had finally been let in. It started crawling toward me. No sound, no breath, just the soft friction of its limbs dragging over the vinyl floor. I backed away slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to slam the door, to burn the whole RV to the ground. But I couldn't look away. I couldn't even blink. Sarah was frozen, half curled up behind the dining bench, eyes locked on the thing. Then it spoke. Not in a child's voice, in mine. I shouldn't have left him. The sound hit me like a sledgehammer. Hearing my own voice echoed back at me in that warped, high-pitched mimicry, like a recording being played on stretched tape, made my stomach twist. That wasn't a baby. It was never a baby. It was me, reflected back in the most broken, vulnerable form it could take. And it knew. I snapped. I lunged forward and kicked the thing, hard, sending it skidding across the floor into the wall with a wet thud. It didn't cry, didn't react. It just twitched, then began crawling again, still grinning. I reached for the emergency flare under the seat, a leftover from a forgotten safety kit, and lit it. Bright red light filled the cabin like blood, drowning out the pale LED glow. The creature hissed. Its skin began to blister in the heat. Not smoke, not fire. But like it was being peeled apart from the inside. It scurried, fast now, toward the back room, moving like a centipede, limbs folding and unfolding at impossible angles. I followed, flare in one hand, flashlight in the other, heart pounding in my ears. But the room was empty. Gone. I didn't sleep again that night. Sarah and I sat outside until dawn, wrapped in emergency blankets, watching the horizon like it might try to swallow us next. Every sound made us flinch. Every breeze felt like breath on our necks. When the sun rose, something was different. The RV looked normal, untouched. No signs of intrusion, no black eyes, no grinning mouth. But I knew it had been real. Sarah did too. That morning, we made a decision. We were going to find answers, not from the internet, not from podcasts or Reddit forums, but from the people who'd lived in this land long before highways and RV parks ever scarred it. We drove to Mescalero, into the heart of the Apache reservation. I had a friend from college, Alan, whose family still lived there. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I called and told him where we'd camped, what we'd heard, his voice went quiet. He told us to come. Not to tell anyone else. Just come. His uncle met us at the edge of the village, an older man with deep lines on his face and pale gray eyes that had clearly seen too much. He didn't ask many questions, just walked us down a narrow path behind their home, out into the brush where the desert still breathed untouched by pavement. There was a fire already burning, stones in a ring, sage and something stronger in the smoke. It burned in my throat, made my eyes water. "You heard it?" he said, not a question. Sarah nodded. "You let it see you?" "Yes," I said. "Worse, I let it in." His expression didn't change, just a long breath. "They are not ghosts," he said. "They're older, hungrier. We call them shinadzo, desert mimics. They do not feed on flesh. They feed on sorrow, regret, shame. Whatever you buried, they will wear." I thought about the thing smiling with my voice, the spiral handprints in the sand, the crying. "They'll follow you," he continued, "but only if you listen. That first sound, that cry, it's the invitation. It's not calling for help. It's seeing who will answer." Sarah covered her mouth. "I did," she whispered. "So did I admitted. The elder stirred the fire. The embers sparked upward like fireflies trying to escape. "There is only one way to sever the connection," he said. "You must give it back. Not the mimic, the memory, the shame. Speak it, out loud. Bury it with intention, otherwise it will always find you again." Sarah looked at me, then looked away. "I can't," she said. "You can," the elder said, "or it will return in a different form. A louder cry, a closer face." Silence sat between us for a long time. And then I spoke. "When I was 10, I began, voice rough. I saw something in the desert behind my grandfather's ranch. I told myself for years it wasn't real, but I think it saw me, marked me. I swallowed hard. I spent years pretending I was okay. I told everyone I was just tired. I laughed off the panic attacks. I buried everything I saw. And now, it's back." I took a deep breath, the smoke cutting through my lungs like thorns. "I see it when I close my eyes. That crawling thing, that mimic, wearing my face." The elder nodded slowly. He handed me a strip of rawhide and a small, flat stone. "Write what you want to leave behind," he said. "Bury it before the fire dies." Sarah took the other stone. We sat for nearly an hour, neither of us speaking, just scratching lines into soft stone with the edge of a knife, like carving pieces of ourselves away. When we were done, we dug small holes and placed the stones inside, covered them, pressed the earth flat. The elder said a prayer. When it was finished, the fire sputtered and died all at once. No wind, no warning, just silence and peace. Not total, not perfect, but enough. That night, we parked at a rest stop near Silver City, slept without fear for the first time in weeks. No crying, no lying, no laughter, just the hum of the desert, steady and still. But even now, I don't let myself forget, because I think that's the real danger, forgetting that we carry shadows, forgetting that the desert remembers. We kept driving. Sarah didn't talk much those first few days, and I didn't press her. Healing, I think, is less about answers and more about space, about letting the air move around the wound without touching it too fast. We stayed off the main highways, avoiding campgrounds, noise, towns. Every night, we parked somewhere with a wide view of the stars, somewhere we could see anything coming from miles away. But nothing came. No crying, no whispers, no crawling things beneath the floorboards. Just silence. Eventually, one night, Sarah told me the truth. She waited until we were parked off a dirt road near Ajo, Arizona. The windows were open. A breeze came in, warm and dry, like the desert was holding its breath. She was sitting in the passenger seat, legs pulled to her chest, staring out at the night. "I had a miscarriage," she said. I looked over, didn't speak, didn't move. "I was alone. You were gone for work. I never told you. I pretended it hadn't happened, told myself it wasn't far along enough to matter. I pushed it down and kept pushing. And when we heard that baby cry out in the desert, I think it found that place in me. That hole." She turned to me, eyes rimmed red, not with tears, but with exhaustion. It wasn't just feeding on me. It was me, the version of me that never got to grieve, the version that still hears the echo every time it's quiet. I reached out and took her hand, not as comfort, but as a tether, to remind her she was still here, still real. "I buried something," she said softly. but I never said goodbye. We stayed in that spot for 3 nights, not out of fear, but something like respect. She left her own offering in the sand on the second night, her ultrasound photo, folded and wrapped in cloth, buried beneath a small circle of stones. I didn't ask where she'd kept it all this time. That wasn't mine to know. It's been 5 months now. We've been to Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, all the way out to the Great Lakes and back down through the plains. Our RV looks different now, less polished, more lived in. There's a small dream catcher swinging from the rearview mirror, a gift from Alan's uncle. It doesn't feel like a superstition anymore. It feels like a reminder that not everything unseen is imaginary, that not every sound in the dark is a threat, but not every silence is safety either. We still camp, still sleep in the wild, but we listen differently now, with attention, not fear, with presence, not paranoia, because here's what I've learned. The desert doesn't lie, it reveals. What we hear out there, whether it's a baby's cry or a whisper in the wind, it isn't always meant to scare us. Sometimes it's meant to show us the parts of ourselves we've locked away, the griefs we've ignored, the regrets we've denied. And if we listen carefully without running, without explaining it away, we can meet those shadows face to face. We can give them back. Not to forget, but to let go. There are still nights I wake up in sweat, convinced I hear that sound again, that shrill, warbled cry just beyond the window. But it fades, because I've stopped answering it. Stopped pretending I'm not haunted. I am. We all are in our own way, and the road doesn't erase that, but it transforms it. Sarah and I, this journey we're on isn't about outrunning what happened anymore. It's about reclaiming space, reclaiming silence, reclaiming the parts of us that survived. Not every camper out here knows what they're stepping into. Not every trailhead marks the boundaries of the old world, the spiritual scars left behind in the sand, the bones, the voices. But if you do hear something, really hear it. Stop. Don't dismiss it, and don't invite it in unless you're ready to be seen. Because the desert doesn't just echo back what you say, it echoes back who you are, the real you, the fractured you, the part you buried beneath years of noise and asphalt, the part you hoped would stay dead. But nothing stays dead out here. Not in the silence, not in the dark, not where the land still remembers. So if you're out there one night in the middle of nowhere and you hear something that shouldn't be there, a baby crying, a voice calling your name, a knock at the door when no one's outside, don't panic. But don't forget what you carry. Don't forget what you've left behind. Because the land won't, and sometimes it just wants to give it back. Story 5. I don't remember seeing his thumb out. That's the first thing I always go back to when I think about what happened on that drive. His arm wasn't raised, he wasn't waving, he was just standing there, still as a fence post. Not walking, not facing traffic like a normal hitchhiker would. Just there. Middle of nowhere, Arizona, somewhere between Seligman and Peach Springs. The air was so dry it crackled. My buddy Sam was dozing in the passenger seat, his face lit soft orange from the dashboard lights. It was one of those perfect dusks, golden hour, fading into deep desert blue, and we were 3 days into what was supposed to be the most freeing trip of our lives. We had rebuilt the van ourselves, a 1973 Volkswagen Westphalia, forest green and sun-bleached to hell. It had taken us months, blood, sweat, arguments, a cracked transmission, more cursing than I care to admit. But by the time summer rolled around, we had it running like it had been born again. Our goal was simple. Drive Route 66 from California to Oklahoma, camp where we could, meet strange folks, maybe get a few good stories out of it. We got more than stories. That stretch of road was quiet, too quiet. No other cars, not even a gas station light off in the distance. Just the straight black asphalt ribbon cutting through dry scrubland, the occasional yucca tree silhouetted against the sky like a warning. I remember the sound of the tires humming, that gentle rhythm that makes your thoughts drift. And that's when I saw him. A man, standing perfectly still on the right shoulder of the road, maybe 20 feet ahead. I slowed instinctively. Not because I meant to stop, not really. just because it didn't make sense. He wasn't walking. He wasn't turning toward us. He looked like he'd been planted there. Sam stirred. "What's up?" "There's a guy. Up there," I pointed. He sat up straighter, squinted, and then we were next to him. I slowed the van to a crawl. My foot hovered over the brake. We both stared. The man was tall, real tall, lanky in a way that didn't look unhealthy, but wrong. He wore a denim jacket and dusty jeans, boots that looked too new for how remote this place was. His hair was long and tangled, like he'd been out here for weeks. But his face, God, his face looked clean. Pale, no sunburn, no grime, just smooth and expressionless, like a mannequin left out in the desert. I rolled down the window a little. "You all right, man?" He didn't answer at first, just looked at me. His eyes were dark, way too dark for someone with that complexion. Almost like the pupils took up the whole iris, but there was no menace in them, not yet, just blankness, like a flat wall of water. Then he said, "I could use a ride." His voice wasn't weird. That's the thing. If it had sounded wrong, mechanical, or too smooth, maybe we'd have driven on. But it sounded normal, like someone you'd meet outside a bar, a little tired but friendly enough. I glanced at Sam. He shrugged, but his eyes said, "We shouldn't." We were city kids, both of us, cautious by nature, but something about being out there in the wide open makes you feel different, braver, dumber. I unlocked the sliding door. "Hop in." He did. And the second that door shut behind him, I felt it, like the temperature dropped 3 degrees. The air inside the van changed. He sat on the bench seat in the back, hands folded neatly in his lap, not saying a word. Sam turned around in his seat, watching him. "You headed east?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "Yes. Where to?" "Doesn't matter." I forced a chuckle. "All right. Well, we're going as far as New Mexico tonight. Probably camp out near the border." He just nodded. Didn't ask for water, didn't comment on the van, didn't introduce himself. Just stared out the window like there was something waiting out there. We drove for maybe 15 minutes in silence. The sun had vanished completely now, and the van's headlights looked like they were struggling against the vast black around us. The desert at night, it's a different kind of dark. Not like the forest, where things creak and chirp. The desert is dead quiet, and it was starting to press in around us. Sam leaned toward me, whispering, "I don't like this." "What?" "I don't know. He smells off." That's when I noticed it too. A faint metallic tang. Not like BO, not even like blood. It smelled like rusted coins soaked in cold water. I adjusted the rearview mirror. The hitchhiker wasn't looking out the window anymore. He was looking at me, eyes locked onto mine through the mirror. Not blinking, just watching. I felt a chill crawl up the back of my neck. I cleared my throat. "So, you been traveling long?" No answer. Sam spoke up. "Hey man, you okay back there?" Still no answer. I checked the mirror again. He was still staring at me. Then, almost too softly to hear, he said, "You shouldn't have stopped." I tapped the brakes. Hard. Sam twisted around. "What the hell does that mean?" The man, if that's what he was, leaned forward slightly. Not threatening, not sudden, just a slow, deliberate shift of weight. "You weren't supposed to see me," he said. The van filled with an awful silence. I could hear the blood in my ears. Sam looked at me, eyes wide, his voice tight. "Pull over." "I'm not stopping again." I said, "Pull over." No. I didn't know why I said that. I just knew. Something in me screamed that if we stopped again, it would be worse. That whatever we'd picked up was now inside, and the rules of the road didn't apply anymore. "Let me out," the man said. Sam turned fully toward him. Gladly. But the man didn't move. He just sat there, that thin face unreadable, those black eyes flat as ink. "Open the door." I told him, "There's a latch right behind you." He didn't reach for it. Just said again, "Open the door." "I'm driving, man. I can't stop right now." And then, only then, he smiled. That smile didn't belong on a human face. It stretched too wide. The corners didn't move the way they should. There was no warmth in it, no amusement, just something. Gleeful, hungry. The lights in the van flickered. Sam shouted, "What the hell?" The engine coughed. The dashboard lights blinked off, then on again. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. The van started to swerve. I fought it, trying to keep us on the road. And from the back seat, the hitchhiker whispered, "You brought me back." Back from where? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't get the words out. Sam lunged for the door. "Stop the van! I'm trying!" We were sliding, tires screeching on loose gravel. The desert to our right yawned wide and dark, nothing but shadow and silence. And then everything stopped. The van jerked to a halt like it had hit something, even though there was nothing there. The lights blinked again. I slammed it into park and heart hammering, ready to confront the thing in the back seat. But he was gone. The sliding door was shut, and the seat was empty. I stared at that empty bench seat for a long time, waiting for something to move, for him to reappear from behind the curtains or crawl up from the floorboards like a nightmare breaking through. But there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just the faint smell of cold rust still lingering in the van like a memory that didn't want to leave. Sam opened the passenger door and stumbled out into the desert night, gasping. "He's gone," he said, like saying it out loud might make it real. I joined him outside. The air was still, not just calm, still, like the wind had been sucked away. The moon hung low and full over the desert, casting long shadows behind the cacti and shrubs, stretching them across the ground like reaching fingers. I shivered. We walked around the van, slowly, flashlights out. Nothing. No footprints, no dust disturbed. The van's side door was still shut tight, locked from the inside. We hadn't stopped for more than a second. He couldn't have just disappeared. But he had. "What the hell just happened?" Sam asked. His voice was thin, almost cracking. I'd never heard him sound scared before. Not really. "I don't know," I said. And I didn't. I felt like I'd just stepped out of reality, like the rules we knew didn't apply anymore. Whatever had just ridden with us wasn't human. It wore the shape of a man, sure, but it wasn't one. It had stared at me like it knew me, like it'd been waiting. We didn't speak again that night until we found a turnout a few miles up the road. It was a pull-off next to a dry creek bed with nothing around but desert and sky. I parked and killed the engine. We were both too shaken to keep driving, and neither of us wanted to admit how rattled we really were. Inside the van, we kept all the lights on. Sam laid out his sleeping bag in the front seat and tried to joke about it, some half-hearted line about desert mushrooms and shared hallucinations, but the laugh didn't stick. I sat in the back, staring at the spot where he'd sat, that perfectly clean spot on the bench seat where there was no dust, not even a smudge, like the thing hadn't touched the earth at all. I didn't sleep. Not really. Just closed my eyes and drifted in and out of shallow, haunted dreams. All heat and breath and the smell of metal in the back of my throat. Every time I jolted awake, I thought I saw something move in the corner of the van. A shadow. A shape. But nothing was ever there. Morning came too bright and too quiet. Sam made coffee on the little camp stove, hands shaking just a bit as he poured. "You think we picked up a ghost?" he asked finally, as we sat under the pop-top, watching the sunrise burn the edges of the desert gold. "I don't know if ghosts make the lights flicker and mess with the engine like that." Fair point. He sipped his coffee. Could have been something else. Skinwalker, Wendigo, demon. "You been on Reddit again?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You got a better explanation?" I didn't. We decided not to talk about it after that. Just let the road pull us forward. But something had changed. The freedom we felt at the start of the trip, that lightness, that open sky wonder, it was gone now. Every night after that, we parked in well-lit spots, RV parks, campgrounds with other people. We stuck close to truckers and tourists and tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But the thing is, something followed us. Not him, exactly. Not the hitchhiker. I never saw that same face again. But every now and then, especially in the dead hours between midnight and 3, we'd hear things. Little things, scratching under the van, taps on the window. A whisper of footsteps circling the vehicle, slow and deliberate, just beyond the curtains. One night near Santa Rosa, we parked in a rest area surrounded by cottonwoods and mesquite, figuring the trees might offer some shade in the morning. But as soon as we killed the engine, we both felt it. That pressure, like being watched. That same sudden stillness in the air. Neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other and knew. Sam locked all the doors. I closed the curtains tight. We didn't cook. We didn't step outside. We just sat in that van like prey animals, hoping the predator would pass by. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the knocking. 3 knocks. Light. Precise. On the driver's side window. I didn't move. Another knock. On the sliding door. Sam whispered, "Don't look." I couldn't. Then a voice, soft, familiar, almost gentle, right outside the canvas of the pop top. "You brought me back." The exact same words from that night on the road. I froze. My breath caught. My skin went cold. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember it was morning and the van hadn't been touched. No footprints, no scratches, nothing broken. But that smell, that cold, metallic scent, was back, stronger than before. We didn't talk about it after that. Not even in jokes. We just kept driving. We finished the Route 66 trip a few days later in Oklahoma. Took pictures. Smiled for Instagram. Told people it was the road trip of a lifetime. But something stayed with us. Something changed. Sometimes I still hear knocking when I sleep in the van. Sometimes I catch a reflection in the glass that doesn't belong to me. A tall, pale man in a denim jacket standing perfectly still just outside the edge of the frame. Once in the dead of winter, when I parked up north, I found footprints in the snow. Just 2. Leading right up to the sliding door. None leaving. They say the desert holds on to things. Memories. Ghosts. Curses. I used to think that was just campfire talk. But I know better now. I know there's something out there that walks the highways between places people have forgotten. I know it takes on faces that feel just familiar enough to trick you into stopping. I know it feeds on the door opening, the invitation, the kindness. And I know once you've seen it, it doesn't let you go. Not really. It waits. And sometimes it knocks. We tried to move on. I mean, what else could we do? Pretend it didn't happen? Treat it like some fever dream? I told myself over and over that it was just exhaustion or paranoia, some mix of desert heat and highway hypnosis. But deep down in that quiet, primal part of my brain that still listens to gut instinct, I knew better. The van changed too, subtly at first. The lights flickered more often. The fan in the back would start spinning on its own in the middle of the night, even when everything was turned off. The smell, that faint rust and ozone scent, became harder to ignore. Not overpowering, but always there, just enough to make you wrinkle your nose and wonder if something was bleeding somewhere in the walls. I tried cleaning everything. I pulled the bedding, sprayed air fresheners, checked the engine for leaks. Nothing helped. Sam stopped coming on trips after that. He said he needed a break from the road, and I didn't blame him. I kept going, though. Maybe I thought if I could outrun it, it'd let me go. Maybe I just didn't want to go back to a normal life, because nothing about me felt normal anymore. A few months later, I was parked outside a place called Amboy Crater in California. I'd gone west again, retracing parts of Route 66, like maybe facing it head-on would break the spell. I rolled into that blackened volcanic field just before sunset. No other campers. Just me and miles of cracked lava rock and dead silence. It was beautiful in a kind of haunted, scorched earth way, the kind of place that feels like it remembers when the world was still angry. I cooked dinner with the doors open, letting the cool desert air drift in. I was starting to feel almost peaceful, like maybe the road had finally loosened its grip. Then I saw the figure. About 30 yards away, just standing at the edge of the old trailhead, a tall, thin silhouette against the orange sky. Still, watching. I didn't move. It wasn't him, not exactly, not the same face. This one was older, maybe, dressed different, worn flannel, long, dusty coat. But the posture, that unbearable stillness, it was the same. That same wrongness, like something was trying to wear human skin but didn't quite know how to move inside it. I closed the van door and locked it, calm and quiet, like you might if you were trying not to spook a wild animal. He didn't follow. Not that night, but when I woke up at 2:47 a.m., the same hour every time, my headlights were on. I never turned them on. And on the windshield, written in dust from the inside, just 3 words, You picked me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat there in that dark van for hours, heart pounding, hands clenched around my sleeping bag like it could protect me. And I remembered something from that first night, something that hadn't seemed important at the time. When Sam had asked him where he was headed, the man had said, "Wherever you are." That hadn't been a joke. That had been the answer. I started researching afterward, deep dives, forums, podcasts, old folklore. I needed to know what this thing was. Why us? Why me? I found threads about phantom hitchhikers, stories dating back decades. Common themes: lonely highways, strange disappearances, ghostly figures who vanish without a trace, but most of those ended benign. Sad, eerie, but not hostile. This was different. This thing, whatever it was, felt older. It wasn't trying to warn me or seek help. It wanted something else, something it hadn't gotten yet. I found an old Navajo story in a dusty corner of the internet, half buried on a website about cursed lands in the Southwest. It told of a spirit that walks the roads, not bound to a body, not bound to time, wearing different forms to lure travelers into giving it permission. Sometimes it rides with you. Sometimes it waits. It doesn't need to hurt you right away. It just needs a moment, when you agree, when you open the door, when you let it in. That's the part that haunts me most. I said yes. I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but I said it. I offered a ride. I looked into its eyes and spoke like it was real. And in that moment, it became real. After that, I stopped picking up anyone, ever. I barely stopped at gas stations unless there were other people around. I kept driving, state to state, sleeping with one hand on the keys and one eye on the windows. But it didn't matter. You can't outrun something that's inside the van. It came to a head outside Flagstaff. I was parked near the forest line up in the pines, trying to get a little elevation before summer really kicked in. Quiet, cold, peaceful, almost too quiet. Around midnight, the knocking started again. This time it was fast, urgent, back corner of the van, right under the bed. Not one knock, not two. 6. I sat up, cold sweat soaking my back, heart beating so loud I could barely hear. Then the knocking stopped and something breathed right beneath the van floor. Close, slow, like something was pressing its face to the metal and whispering into it. I grabbed the keys, climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. As I did, the back of the van shifted, like weight had just been lifted off, like something had been inside and just stepped out. I tore down the mountain road, tires spitting gravel, didn't look back once. Eventually, I had to stop. I pulled into a Love's gas station on the outskirts of town, parked under a floodlight, surrounded by trucks and movement and normalcy. And I sat there. Sat until the sun came up, and I cried. Not out of fear, not even from exhaustion. I cried because I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit until then. This wasn't just happening to me, it was attached to me. Everywhere I went, it followed. Not always seen, not always felt, but there, waiting, watching, and I had no idea what it wanted, only that it wasn't done. I haven't picked up another soul since that night. Not a hitchhiker, not a stranded tourist, not even a kid waving with a flat tire. It broke something in me, something I used to love about the road, the openness, the connection, the humanity. Now I see shadows in every reflection. I hear knocking in places that should be silent. I've learned to tell the difference between normal footsteps and the ones that don't leave tracks. And if you're ever driving Route 66 and you see someone on the shoulder, someone tall, pale, with a denim jacket and a look in his eyes that chills you even under the desert sun, keep driving. Don't stop, don't roll down your window, don't ask where he's headed because he's not going somewhere. He's going with you. There's something about being alone in a van that no one tells you. Not really. It's not just the isolation. It's not just the distance from city noise or people or Wi-Fi. It's the way silence gains mass out here. It presses on you, fills every corner of the van like cold fog. You start to notice things most people filter out. The creak of fiberglass under temperature change, the hum of your own heartbeat echoing in your ears, the subtle shift of weight when no one else is moving. I was camped just off a service road in New Mexico, surrounded by scrub and red earth and silence. A place I'd picked precisely because it was empty. A place where nothing could sneak up on me without kicking up a dust storm. I'd pulled the van into a narrow wash, far off any map, and kept the headlights off. No cell signal, no one around for miles. I figured if I couldn't outrun him, maybe I could hide. And for a while it worked. 3 nights. Nothing strange. No knocks, no cold spots, no fogged mirrors. Just me, my breath, the open sky, and the occasional coyote yipping in the distance. Then, on the 4th night, I saw something glowing. Faint at first, just a shimmer along the horizon, like headlights over a hill. I killed the lantern and squinted through the windshield, expecting maybe some lost ATV group or border patrol or something human. But it wasn't headlights, it was a shape, tall, bright, standing dead still at the top of the ridge, pulsing like a heat mirage. Wrong somehow, not flickering, not swaying, just vibrating faintly, like the boundary between its world and ours wasn't quite holding. And then it started to walk down the hill toward me. No sound, no dust, just movement, like it was gliding down glass. I turned the ignition. Key clicked once. Again, nothing. Battery was full. I just checked it that afternoon. I didn't look back up. I just crawled into the back and held my breath, praying it wasn't real, praying that maybe I'd hit the edge. Maybe this was what a full-blown break with reality looked like. But when I closed my eyes, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. Then the softest whisper I've ever heard, so low I thought I'd imagined it. Shh, you let me in. That was the first time I screamed, and that's when the van finally started on its own. I didn't turn the key. I swear to you, I didn't touch a thing. The engine came to life like it had been waiting for the right moment. I floored it, tearing out of the wash with no headlights, skidding over gravel and sagebrush and prayer. I didn't stop for gas, food, sleep. I just drove. Every sign I passed felt like a dare. Welcome to Arizona. Historic Route 66. Next service is 100 miles. None of it comforted me anymore because I was back where it started. On his road. That night, I crashed in a truck stop outside Kingman, Arizona, parked between 2 semis, bright lights, cameras, other humans breathing and existing just yards away. And still, I felt watched. I didn't sleep. I lay there, every light in the van turned on, music playing softly from my phone, the faint lull of AM radio static, anything to drown out the knowing. Around 2:47 a.m., the phone died, fully charged an hour earlier. Then the lights dimmed, then the van rocked, just slightly, like someone had leaned against it. Then again, stronger. A shove, and then came the sound I will never forget for as long as I live. A whispering chorus, just outside the glass, layered voices like dry leaves scraping metal. You picked me, you picked me, you picked me. Over and over. I turned the key, slammed the gas, peeled out of that lot without even looking. The semis didn't move. No one came out to check. And when I finally dared glance in the rearview mirror, I saw them, a line of tall figures standing at the edge of the lot, perfectly still, their eyes like hot coals in their skulls. Not just one hitchhiker anymore. There were many. I started sleeping during the day after that, parking in crowded grocery store lots, staying where there were people, movement, distraction. I never stayed in one spot more than a few hours. I learned every noise the van made, every creak, every rattle, every shift in weight when I turned. And I stopped looking in mirrors. They started showing things that weren't me. Once, I was brushing my teeth in a rest stop bathroom, just trying to feel human again. And I saw him over my shoulder in the mirror. Clear as day. Same pale skin, same unnatural stillness. But when I turned around, the room was empty. That night, I ripped the rear view off the windshield and threw it into the desert. I began to understand in some horrible, unraveling way that this wasn't just about the van or the road or even about me. This thing, these things, they fed off something deeper. Regret. That's what bound them to me. It wasn't just that I let him in. It was that I doubted myself afterward, that I looked back, that I questioned the moment instead of trusting my gut. I gave them a door, And every time I flinched, every time I wondered if I was imagining it, they stepped a little further through. That's the part they want. The hesitation, the denial. They don't need fear. They need your permission. I thought about abandoning the van, leaving it to rust in the middle of nowhere, just walking off into the desert and letting the sun burn everything away. But I couldn't do it because that van isn't just haunted. It's mine. It's been with me through everything. Good, bad, terrifying. It's my home, my shield, my warning. And if I give it up, who gets it next? Who climbs in behind the wheel, smiling at the open road, not knowing what waits when the sun goes down? I can't let that happen, so I stay with it. I drive. I sleep with one eye open and a knife near the door, even though I know it won't help. I tell my story every chance I get, to truckers, to strangers at rest stops, to kids who think the road is just a playlist and pretty views. I tell them, don't pick up hitchhikers. Don't ignore that gut feeling when the air gets too still. And if you ever find yourself on Route 66 late at night and you see a man standing by the road with his thumb out and his eyes too wide for his face, keep going. Because once you let him in, he's never really gone. I'm writing this from a public library in northern Utah. Free Wi-Fi, a clean bathroom, bright fluorescent lights. Feels like a sanctuary, at least for now. The van's parked in the lot, backed into a corner space so I can watch it through the window. I still have to know where it is. Still have to keep it in sight. It's like a wound I can't stop picking at, or a pet I can't abandon, even when it growls at me in my sleep. I know how that sounds. I really do. But after everything, the nights with no stars, the mirrors that don't reflect me, the cold hands pressing against the inside of my own skin, the truth starts to take on a different shape. This isn't about ghosts anymore, not in the way people mean. It's about something older, smarter, something that's been here, watching travelers roll across this land for generations, something that's learned to look like us. I started digging. Between gas station catnaps and long drives under empty skies, I found stories. A guy in 79 who saw a man step out of a cornfield and walk alongside his RV for 3 miles, never breaking pace, never blinking. A woman in 2003 who picked up a silent hitchhiker outside Winslow, only to have him vanish from her passenger seat 5 minutes later, leaving only the smell of burnt ozone and a single long scratch down her dashboard. A family in 2016 whose van veered off the road during a sudden blackout near Tucumcari. They woke up with no injuries, but a new scar on their daughter's shoulder that hadn't been there before. A perfect oval, ringed with symmetrical dots, surgical, precise. They all tried to forget, they all tried to move on, and none of them ever really did. Because once you see it, once it sees you, you can't go back to the ordinary world. It follows. It waits, sometimes for years, and then it knocks. I've been trying to remember the exact moment I made the mistake, the specific instant I gave it what it needed. Was it when I opened the door, or when I offered water, or maybe when I looked into his eyes and let myself feel sorry for him? I've replayed it 1,000 times trying to isolate the sin, but maybe that's the trick. Maybe it wasn't any one thing. Maybe it was all of it. That first moment of hesitation, that doubt, was like blood in the water, and now I live in its tide. I've developed habits, routines, not superstitions, not really, just precautions born from raw necessity. Never drive past midnight, never camp alone 2 nights in a row, never sleep near a dry wash or a place that feels hollow, never listen when you hear voices calling your name, never answer when you hear knocking and see no feet beneath the door. And if you do see feet, don't assume they're human. I used to think the scariest thing about being on the road was getting lost. Now I know better. It's being found. There was one night in Colorado, just a few weeks ago, that almost broke me. I'd pulled into a free Bureau of Land Management spot off a forest road. Just a clearing in the trees, barely room to turn the van around. But I was exhausted, shaking. I hadn't slept in almost 2 days, and the clearing felt calm. I told myself I'd just rest my eyes for 20 minutes. I woke up to the van door open, wide open, the curtain fluttering, Air like ice, the sound of whispering, not around me this time, but inside the van, inside my mind. They were crawling in now, through the seams, through the cracks in my thinking, using my memories like tools, like entry points, showing me things I wanted, things I feared, faces of people I'd lost, my father's voice, my ex's laugh, a smell I hadn't caught since childhood, cinnamon and wet leaves, pulling me into a dream I didn't agree to. I curled into the corner and screamed until I passed out. When I woke up, the door was closed, and every window was fogged from the inside, except for one long handprint drawn in the condensation across the windshield, upside down, from inside the glass. I didn't drive for a while after that. I just sat there in the daylight, arms wrapped around my knees, waiting for the sky to fall. It didn't. But something shifted that day. I felt it. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They were testing me. Like something in me was changing too. Like I'd crossed some threshold without realizing. Here's the part that matters, the part I want someone to understand. They feed on disconnection, on rootlessness, on our desperate need to be anywhere but here. They offer direction when we feel lost, purpose when we feel numb, guidance when we don't trust our own instincts. They give you what you think you want, and they take what you didn't know you were giving. When I picked up that hitchhiker, I wasn't just being nice. I was running from something, from a breakup, from guilt, from the weight of a life I hadn't really committed to. He knew that. He saw that weakness like a crack in glass, and all he had to do was press. I wasn't cursed. I was chosen, and now I'm trying to make peace with that. So here's what I've come to believe through all of this. Fear isn't just a warning. It's a compass. We're so used to pushing it down, brushing it off, calling it irrational, but sometimes fear is the only honest thing in the room. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't negotiate. It tells you, this is wrong. That night on Route 66, when I saw him standing in the dark, I knew. Before I even stopped the van, before I even rolled down the window, I knew. And I didn't listen. If you're hearing this, maybe you're a traveler too. Maybe you're one of the dreamers, one of the restless ones, the kind of person who finds peace in motion, purpose in maps. That's a beautiful thing. But don't let the road make you forget who you are. Don't mistake open space for safety. Don't confuse quiet for peace. And above all, don't open your door to something that doesn't belong, because not everything on the road is lost. Some things are looking, some things are waiting, and if you let them in, you may never drive alone again.